Chapter 50-52. When the Qing clan's ancestor saw this, his eyes narrowed. His lips trembled slightly, but he was unable to say a single word. He had only heard of the Empress Phoenix Master's power, but now that he had seen it with his own eyes, he knew that even a powerful cultivator like him couldn't help but tremble at this scene. Fengjiu retracted his hand and glanced coldly at the corpses on the ground. Then, he looked at the Qing ancestor and said, "Since we're all here, we'll stay here." Yes, I'll bring you to the courtyard to rest." The Qing ancestor quickly regained his senses and said. He didn't dare to say anything else and quickly brought them to the backyard. Fengjiu and the rest, who were originally going to stay at the inn, ended up staying at the Qing residence. This made the Qing family members very nervous and cautious, afraid that they would do something wrong and anger her. The only thing that made the Qing ancestor feel fortunate was that other than the few supreme martial artists of the Qing family and him, the rest of the people in the residence weren't implicated. This was also a source of hope for the Qing family. At least, the Qing family wasn't full of weaklings. In 3 days, the Qing ancestor handed over all the property and resources in the residence to Fengjiu. Of course, perhaps some disciple or someone secretly kept some, but no one knew. Outsiders wanted to find out who the green-robed lady was. What did the Qing family do? But no one knew. 3 days later, in front of Fengjiu and the other managers of the Qing clan, the old ancestor of the Qing clan personally crippled his cultivation. Then, he was carried away by the Qing clan members. They hurriedly left the Qing clan and Longnan. Fengjiu and the others stayed in the Qing residence for 1 more day. After they sold the Qing residence, they left as well. Those who were curious about her identity watched them leave, but they didn't dare to secretly follow them or inquire about their whereabouts. They could only watch as they left the city and disappeared to an unknown location. Half a month later, at the Immortal Island, Mu Chen and Hao were playing on the Rainbow Bridge. Their bell-like laughter could be heard from time to time. Air's laughter spread with the wind. Big brother, come and chase me. Come and chase me." She ran with a smile on her face, her feet moving like the wind. She turned around and shouted to her 2 brothers behind her. Hao and Mu Chen looked at each other with doting smiles on their faces. "Then you have to be careful, lest we catch up to you and make you cry." As soon as they finished speaking, the 2 of them dashed out like the wind and chased after the little girl in the little dress. "Hee, you guys can't catch up with me," Sun said with a smile. Seeing that they were chasing after him, he immediately sped up to let them catch up. Her skills might not be as good as theirs, but in terms of escaping speed, the 2 of them might not be able to catch up with her. The 3 children were playing on the island, while the contracted beasts were wandering around the island, especially the newly arrived ones. The divine beast lion was filled with surprise and curiosity towards this place. However, when it saw that there were ancient divine beasts and sacred beasts everywhere on this island, it clamped its tail and obediently squatted at the side, not daring to appear in front of those ancient divine beasts and sacred beasts. Chapter 50-53. There weren't many people on the island. There were only some cranes or flower fairies transformed into maids. She was the only one in the main hall. It was very quiet and no one disturbed her. Only the sound of her flipping through the book could be heard. At the same time, outside the island, a young guard and an old man were escorting a man in white. The 3 of them were standing at the entrance of the island. Because of the barrier, they couldn't touch or get close. They just stopped in front. "Young master, we are here." As the old man spoke, he looked at the island covered by clouds. There was a hint of excitement in his voice. The man in white, Yuan Jing, looked forward with a pair of soulless eyes. Even though he knew it was the island of the Empress Phoenix Master, because he couldn't see, he was relatively calm. "I'm Yuan Jing. I'm here to greet the Phoenix Master. His voice was filled with spirit force and pressure. It penetrated the clouds and the barrier and entered the immortal island. The red-crowned crane flying in the sky above the island circled around the entrance and looked around. Hearing the words, it soon flapped its wings and flew towards the main hall. When it arrived at the main hall, there was a flash of light and shadow. The red-crowned crane turned into a beautiful fairy and gently landed in front of the main hall. She walked forward and reported softly, "Master, a guest has come to visit. He said his name is Yuan Jing. Do you want to see him?" Hearing the voice from outside the hall, Fengzhou's hand that was flipping through the book paused. He said, "Let them in." "Yes." The fairy answered softly and turned to fly to greet the guest. Yuan Jing and the other two followed the fairy inside. Since they couldn't see, they didn't know what kind of fairyland it would be after entering the fairy island. However, he clearly felt that the breathing of the two people beside him had changed a little. "Uncle Yuan, is the scenery here very beautiful?" Yuan Jing asked with a hint of a smile in his gentle voice. "Beautiful, it's more than beautiful. It's simply a paradise." The old man couldn't hide his excitement. However, he lowered his voice and didn't dare to speak too loudly. Thinking that his young master couldn't see, he said, "Young master, when your eyes are healed in the future, you will be able to see this fairy-like place." Hearing this, Yuan Jing smiled but didn't say anything. It was only when they arrived before the palace hall that the female immortal went in to report. Then, she led them into the palace hall before withdrawing. Yuan Jing greets Phoenix Master. Yuan Jing bowed to the front. "Greetings, Phoenix Master." The old man and the guard bowed respectfully and knelt down to pay their respects. Fengzhou closed the book in his hand, looked at the three people in the hall, and said, "Sit." "Thank you, Phoenix Master." Yuan Jing thanked him and was led to sit down by the old man. The old man and the guards stood behind him, not daring to look at him. They just stood there quietly with half-closed eyes. "You found the red-eyed spiritual monster's fisheye so quickly?" Fengzhou asked, his gaze falling on Yuan Jing. It had to be said that there was no lack of handsome men and beautiful women in the immortal world. "Yes, as soon as I got the scarlet-eyed spiritual monster's fisheye, I brought it over." As he spoke, he took out a box from his sleeve and handed it to the old man beside him. After the old man received it, he lowered his head and respectfully presented it with both hands. "Phoenix Master, please take a look." Chapter 50-54. After taking a look, she closed the box and said, "Not bad. These are indeed the eyes of an adult red-eyed monster, and they've been preserved very well." She took the box and looked at Yuan Jing, saying, "Since you're Mo Chen's friend and he's the one who asked, I can naturally cure your eyes." "Thank you, Phoenix Master." Yuan Jing stood up and bowed with his hands folded in front of him. "I need to use this fisheye to refine the spiritual liquid. You can stay here for the time being. However, the two people beside you have to leave first." Fengzhou looked at the old man's guards. Because the three children were still here, there were too many people, so she naturally wouldn't let them stay. As for Yuan Jing, she had confirmed with Mo Qin that he was indeed his friend. Moreover, he had praised Yuan Jing a lot. Since that was the case, she would naturally treat him more leniently. Hearing this, Yuan Jing was startled. After a pause, he said to the two people beside him, "Uncle Yuan, you can go back first. But, young master, you can't see. If we're not by your side, it will be very inconvenient." The old man said worriedly. "It's okay. I can do it myself." He smiled and said gently. Seeing this, the old man and the guards responded. They went up and bowed to the Phoenix Master, who was sitting at the head of the table. "Phoenix Master, our young master will have to trouble you." Okay. Fengjiu responded. She called the fairy servant and had her take them away. After they left, she looked at Yuan Jing, who was sitting there, and slowly walked down, saying, "There's a fairy servant here for you to order. If you need anything, just tell the fairy servant to do it for you." Okay. Yuan Jing responded. After thinking for a while, he couldn't help but ask, "Is there anyone else here? Will it be inappropriate for Yuan Jing to be here?" After all, he was a man. In such a large place, if she stayed with him, it would damage her reputation. Hearing this, Fengjiu raised her eyebrows. She looked him up and down and smiled. "Inappropriate? You're thinking too much." As soon as he finished speaking, he called over the immortal servant and had her take him away. After he left, she walked to the door of the hall and released her divine sense. She knew that the three children were chasing each other on the Rainbow Bridge. Seeing this, she gathered her chi and flew towards them. "Mother!" Seeing her, Yu-er immediately rushed towards her. Throwing herself into her bosom, Yu-er giggled, "Mother, mother, big brother and them are unable to catch me. Mother!" Soon after, Hao-er and Mu-chin also arrived in front of their mother. Both of their foreheads were dripping with sweat. After chasing Yu-er for a long time, they were still unable to catch up with her. This really made them surprised. "Sister, how are you so fast?" Mu-chin could not help but ask. He, of course. Master taught me. He said that my skills are not as good as the two of you, but I can win in terms of speed, so I practiced hard. She said proudly, her face full of joy and happiness. Hearing this, Fengjiu smiled and said, "It seems that making you worship Qing Di as your master is indeed the right choice. Mother, I heard people say that our master is very powerful. In the end, is our master powerful? Or is father and mother powerful?" Yu-er raised her head from her bosom and asked curiously while blinking her beautiful big eyes. Chapter 50-55. Ah. Hearing this, Yu-er couldn't help but stare blankly and somewhat anxiously said, "Mother, mother, you and father shouldn't fight with master. Master is very good to us, don't bully him." Hearing this, Fengjiu couldn't help but chuckle. Lightly pinching her little nose, he smiled and said, "You still know how to protect your master. Don't you want to know who is more powerful between father and mother?" Yu thought for a bit, then rolled her eyes and said, "Father and mother are the most powerful. Master is behind father and mother, but he is also very powerful. It's good that you know how to protect your master, this way your master won't dote on you for nothing." Fengjiu chuckled and tapped her nose. She said to the three of them, "A man named Yuan Jing has come to the island. He is here to treat his eyes. Mother is going to help him refine the medicine. You can play by yourselves these days. But don't forget to cultivate, especially you." She looked at her daughter in her arms and said, "The God-striking whip that your master gave you is an incredible treasure. Take it and practice your whip skills well." Don't worry mother, Yu-er will practice the whip well." She quickly nodded and said, "Mother, don't worry, we will look after little sister and not let her play." Hao-er also said, "Mother, I will also work hard to cultivate." Mu-chin also said, "Good, you are all very obedient. You are all my babies." She smiled and hugged the three of them in her arms, kissing them one by one. Seeing their happy and shy appearance, she couldn't help but smile. "Okay, mother will leave first. If you want to eat anything, go find her and let her make it for you. But remember, you can't sneak out of the island," she instructed. "Okay." The three of them responded and watched her leave, then went to the training field. For Yuan Jing, this was a strange place. He couldn't see and didn't even know where to go out of the courtyard. Therefore, after the fairy servant brought him to the guest courtyard, he didn't take a step out of the courtyard for the whole day. Since he couldn't see, even if he went out, he wouldn't be able to see even the most beautiful fairyland. Who knows, he might even cause trouble for the Phoenix Master. Since that was the case, why not stay in this courtyard? Until evening. It's here. Mir poked her head out and looked at the courtyard. Seeing that the sky was gradually darkening, there was no light or fire in the courtyard, it was pitch black, and the man called Yuan Jing was sitting in the courtyard. Who is it? Hearing the voice, Yuan Jing was slightly surprised and looked in the direction of the voice. Although he couldn't see anything, at least his face was facing towards the voice. Oh, it's me, Song Mi. Mi walked in with a tray of food. Why didn't you light the lamps? She said. As she spoke, she put the dinners. Chapter 50-56. On the Immortal Island, there were many treasures like luminous pearls that illuminated the island. But even if they were not used, they would cover their light with cloth. Entering the room, Mi opened the lamp that covered the luminous pearls. In an instant, the light illuminated the entire room. Walking out of the room, Mi smiled and said, "Young Master Yuan, if you need anything, just tell the immortal maidservants. Otherwise, you can ask them to find me. I am usually in the kitchen. If you want to walk around, you can ask the immortal maidservants to show you the way." Saying this, she came to the table. Looking at him who could not see, she asked, "Is it okay for you to eat by yourself? Do you need me to ask the immortal maidservants to help you?" "I can do it myself," Yuan Jing said gently. "Okay, I will leave first. The immortal maidservants will come in to clean up later." Saying this, Mi turned and left. After she left, Yuan Jing ate by himself. He ate slowly and did not eat much. After asking the immortal maidservants to put away the food, he went back to his room to rest. In the next 2 days, although he could walk around the Immortal Island, he could not see, so he did not go out. He just stayed in the courtyard and meditated. 2 days later, Fengjiu came to the courtyard where Yuan Jing lived. When she saw the courtyard, she saw him sitting in the courtyard. Although Yuan Jing couldn't hear it, his hearing was very good. He tilted his head slightly and heard the light footsteps coming. He stood up and saluted in the direction of the footsteps, "Phoenix Master." Fengjiu glanced at him and said, "I have made the red-eyed monster's fish eye into a liquid medicine. I brought it for you to try." Saying this, she walked to his room and said, "Come in." Yuan Jing paused for a moment and followed her in. When he came to the room, he was called to lie on the bed. Looking at Yuan Jing who was lying on the bed with his hands nervously grabbing the sheets under him, Fengjiu chuckled and said, "Relax, I will not do anything to you." Yuan Jing smiled and gradually relaxed. He felt that she was checking his eyes and feeling his pulse. After a while, his eyes were slightly opened by her fingers and a cool liquid dripped into his eyes. He only felt a slight stinging pain in his eyes. Then, the pain was diluted by the coolness of the liquid and gradually became very comfortable. "How do you feel?" Fengjiu asked. At first, it was a little stinging, then it became cool. "Now, my eyes have a very comfortable feeling," Yuan Jing said honestly. "Yes, blink your eyes slightly. Try to let the medicinal liquid seep into your eyes." As Fengjiu spoke, he dripped 2 drops of liquid medicine into his other eye. At the same time, the green lotus qi in his palm began to circulate. Specks of green light, accompanied by pure spiritual energy, fell into his eye. "It's a warm feeling now. It's a little itchy," Yuan Jing continued. He felt a strange sensation coming from his eyes. Fengjiu did not speak but quietly urged the green lotus chi to cooperate with the medicinal liquid to treat him. After about half an hour, she withdrew her palm. However, Yuan Jing had fallen asleep and his breathing had become slow and calm. Glancing at the sleeping person, Feng Nine raised her eyebrows, but she didn't say anything. Instead, she stood up and walked out. With the spiritual liquid, spiritual energy, and green lotus chi, it was no wonder that he fell asleep so comfortably. Chapter 50-57. Oh, the three of them went to the forest, saying that they were going to gain experience. However, Huo Feng and Tun Yun followed them. Mi-er placed the pastries on the small table beside her and asked, "Is mistress looking for them? Do you want me to call them back? Since they went to the forest, let them wander around there." Fengjiu said as she picked up a pastry and ate it. She asked, "Mi-er, has your strength improved recently?" "It has improved a little, and I feel that my fighting strength has increased a lot," Mi-er said with a smile. She continued, "I even asked Uncle Tai to refine another set of knives for me. But I think it will take a long time to refine them." Fengjiu replied. She took a sip of tea and said, "Keep an eye on Yuan Jing in the guest courtyard. If anything is missing, get it for him." "Okay, I know." In the next few days, Fengjiu treated Yuan Jing's eyes almost every day, and then asked him how he felt during the treatment, and if there were any changes in his eyes. On this day, when Fengjiu used the green lotus energy to treat Yuan Jing's eyes again, she continued to ask, "How do you feel today?" "My eyes are hot, as if there is a ball of hot air pressing down on them. It is a little itchy, but it doesn't hurt anymore," Yuan Jing said. Hearing this, Fengjiu retracted her hand and looked at him lying on the bed. She said, "Get up. Come outside and take a look." Hearing this, Yuan Jing was startled, but he did as she said without hesitation. He followed her to the courtyard, and when he heard the footsteps in front of him stop, he also stopped. "Open your eyes and take a look. Tell me, what can you see?" Fengjiu said slowly. Yuan Jing was stunned, and his eyelashes fluttered lightly. During this period of treatment, he had been told not to open his eyes. That was to say, from the day the treatment began, he, who could walk with his eyes open even if he couldn't see, had always kept his eyes closed. Now that he heard her ask him to open his eyes, he couldn't react for a moment. "Open your eyes and see if it's still pitch black." Fengjiu saw that he didn't move and continued. Only then did Yuan Jing slowly open his eyes. His eyes were filled with nervousness, caution, and uneasiness. When he opened his eyes, he still couldn't see the scenery in front of him, but he could vaguely see a blurry white light. His heart skipped a beat, and his entire body began to tremble slightly. I think I saw a shadow." Hearing the nervous and trembling voice, Fengjiu reached out and waved her hand in front of him. "What about now? What did you see?" "I don't know what it is, but it seems like something is waving in front of me, and when it waved, it blocked out half of the light." As he spoke, his voice paused and he could not hide his excitement as he asked, "Phoenix Master, are my eyes almost healed?" Fengjiu retracted her hand. She said, "It was my hand that was waving, but it's a good thing that you can see the light." As she spoke, she placed the medicinal liquid in his hand and said, "Since you can see the light, you can drip the medicinal liquid on your own. Change it to once a day in the morning, noon, and night. After you drip the medicinal liquid, cover your eyes with a piece of cloth. I will come back 3 days later to check again." "Okay, thank you, Phoenix Master." He replied and thanked her, unable to hide the joy and excitement in his heart. Chapter 50-58. Another half a month had passed. On this day, Yuan Jing, who had applied the medicine to his eyes, only felt a cooling sensation in his eyes. There was no longer any itchiness, dryness, or stinging pain. He walked in the room and walked out of the door. When he arrived at the courtyard, he slowly and carefully opened his eyes. The blurry scenery in front of him gradually became clear. The world that had always been pitch black was now filled with a myriad of colors. His heart was trembling. He looked forward and saw the greenery in the courtyard. He saw the small red flowers in the corner of the wall. He saw the verdant trees in the courtyard. The greenery was so beautiful. He even saw the leaves swaying when the wind blew. Occasionally, a few leaves would fly down with the wind, fluttering and landing in the courtyard. I see it, he muttered. His voice was choked with emotion. His eyes involuntarily turned red, and a trace of moisture gathered in his eyes. Is this the color of the world? He said in a daze as he walked forward with large strides. He walked out of the courtyard step by step, and saw the even more beautiful scenery outside. The blue sky, the white clouds, the colorful flowers, the green trees, and the yellow of the withered leaves, the rainbow in the distance. The clouds in the sky, besides the white clouds, could also be a beautiful red. The color of the world is so beautiful. He muttered softly. It was as if he was lamenting, admiring, and amazed. He was like a newborn baby, filled with curiosity and joy towards everything. In the sky, there were beautiful red-crowned cranes flying. There were birds chirping on the branches of the trees. In the pond, lotus flowers were blooming. The lotus leaves were floating on the water's surface, and the fish were swimming in the water. All of this was so beautiful that one could not bear to look away. In the distance, a red figure slowly walked over. Her red dress was very dazzling, allowing him to see her figure from afar. As she gradually came closer, that beautiful face that could topple cities also gradually entered his eyes. He thought that all the beauty in the world could not describe the beauty on her body. Even if he had never seen her before, at this moment, the moment he saw her, he knew that she was the Empress Phoenix Master. She was also the ghost Dr. Fingzhou, the Phoenix Master who had cured his eyes these days. He withdrew his gaze and did not dare to look at her again. He was afraid that he would blaspheme such a noble person. Greetings, Phoenix Master. When she came closer, Yuan Jing bowed his head and bowed to her with hands folded. Can you see? Fengzhou's eyes fell on him. As he raised his head, his eyes fell on Yuan Jing's eyes. Yes, I opened my eyes today. I can see. He answered. Hearing this, Fengzhou nodded. Since you can see it, you can go back. Hearing this, Yuan Jing paused and asked, how can I repay you, Phoenix Master? She cured his eyes but never mentioned anything about payment. How could he repay her? Fengzhou chuckled, you don't have to repay me. After all, I don't lack anything. If you really want to thank someone, thank Mo Qin. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have cured you. Chapter 50-59. Yuan Jing didn't even have time to speak before he felt a powerful aura wrap around him and lift him up. In a flash, he was out of the enchantment of the Immortal Island. His body was no longer wrapped in that power and he fell down. Immediately, he quickly condensed his spirit power and stabilized his body. He stood in the air and looked at the celestial island. He respectfully and solemnly bowed. Phoenix Master's great kindness, I, Yuan Jing, will never forget it. If you need my help in the future, please let me know. After bowing, he took a deep look at the Immortal Island before turning around and leaving. On the Immortal Island, Fengzhou smiled at Yuan Jing's words and didn't take it to heart. Instead, she sent a message to Mo Qin, telling him that Yuan Jing's eyes had been cured and he had left. Then, she went back to her place. During this time, she found a way to go to the lower realm. That was to cultivate the power of the soul. When the time came, she could tear a hole in the void and return to the lower realm. Because of the isolation of the void enchantment, she couldn't know what happened in the lower realm and how Mose was doing. Therefore, after settling down in the upper realm, she wanted to go back and see if Mose was about to wake up. As for the remaining great emperors, they were hiding like turtles. It would be difficult to find them in a short time. Therefore, she wanted to take advantage of this time to see how Mose was doing. After all, it had been so long. Perhaps he had condensed his immortal body. If he needed her help again, she would give him a push so that he could wake up sooner and ascend to the immortal realm. At that time, the two of them would join forces. Even if the three great emperors recovered from their injuries and joined forces, they would be no match for them. As for the three children, they had gone to the beast forest on the immortal island to cultivate. With the fire phoenix following them, she didn't have to worry about them. Therefore, after she returned to her residence, she gave some instructions and entered the space to immerse herself in cultivation. A month later, the Qing Emperor, who had been away for some time, came to Fengzhou's fairy island. He stood with his hands behind his back and looked at the place filled with clouds. He raised his hand and stretched it forward. A powerful aura visible to the naked eye appeared. Then, a boundary appeared. Emperor Qing's eyes flashed slightly. After seeing the scene in front of him, he retracted his hand. His low voice carried the aura of spiritual force as it penetrated the boundary and headed for the enchanted island. Fengzhou. At this time, Fengzhou was still cultivating his spiritual strength in the space. How could he hear him calling out at this time? However, Mi-er heard the voice and flew over on her sword in surprise. She asked, "Who is it? Who dares to call my master by his name?" When she arrived at the entrance of the immortal island and saw the person outside the barrier, Mi-er frowned. She instinctively felt that this was a dangerous person. Could it be that master's enemy had come knocking on his door? Mi-er's heart skipped a beat, and she instinctively took a step back. Her battle prowess was enough to deal with the average person, but against such a dangerous person, it was not enough. "I am the Qing Emperor." The Qing Emperor glanced indifferently at the clouds. With his powerful divine sense, he could tell that there was someone there even though the clouds were blocking his senses. "Qing Emperor." Mi-er was stunned. She exclaimed, "Qing Emperor. Wait a moment, I will call someone to confirm." With that, Mi-er quickly left on her sword. Chapter 50-60. Outside the enchantment barrier, Emperor Qing's face darkened when he heard the conversation. He stood there with his hands behind his back and waited. Hao and Mu Qin slept a little later today, but they had already washed up. They were preparing to practice a set of boxing gloves and then walk around. The two of them were preparing to practice in the yard when they saw Mi-er rushing in. "Ah! You two are awake. That's great, come with me," Mi hurriedly said. The two looked at each other and asked, "What's wrong?" "There's a man outside who says he's Emperor Qing. Master is now in seclusion, and I haven't seen Emperor Qing, so I came to ask you to see if that person is Emperor Qing, lest Master's enemy gets in." Hao and Mu Chen were shocked and they heard this. They said in unison, "You left our master outside the enchantment island?" "I just asked him to wait for a while." Mi-er saw the stunned look on their faces and said, "Let's go quickly. Let's see if it's your master." Hao put away his shocked expression, and a smile appeared on his face. "I don't need to see, I know it's our master." With that, he took the lead and walked out. Their master was Emperor Qing. Many people wanted to cozy up to him, but they couldn't. Only Mi-er dared to leave him outside the enchantment island. Mu Qin saw that his brother had left first and said to Mi-er, I also think it's our master. With our master's reputation, no one would dare to impersonate him." With that, he also quickly walked out. Hearing this, Mir was stunned. She hurriedly called inside, "What? Mir, your master is here, get up quickly." With that, she quickly followed the two outside. In a daze, Mir heard something about her master and immediately jumped out of bed. Outside, when Hao and Mu-chen arrived at the enchantment barrier of the enchantment island, they saw the familiar figure outside and quickly called out, "Master." When Mir, who had hurried over, heard the two's words, she hurriedly used her token to open the barrier. She then awkwardly bowed towards Emperor Qing. Song Mir greets Emperor Qing. "Emperor Qing, please come in, please." The Qing Emperor glanced at her, then looked at the two people beside her and asked, "Where's Cloud 7? "Master, she just woke up and is still in the courtyard." Hao replied. "Qing Emperor, please come to the palace and drink some tea." Mir gestured for him to enter. The Qing Emperor walked forward with Hao and Mu-chen by his side. When they reached the main hall, Mir quickly served him tea and pastries. Seeing that Hao and Mu-chen were both present, she did not stay any longer and left. "Master, have you finished your business? Are you going to bring us back to Cloud Sky Mountain?" Hao asked. When they saw him, their first thought was that their master had finished his business and was going to take them back. After they went back, they probably wouldn't be able to see their mother for a short period of time. After taking a sip of tea, Emperor Qing glanced at them and asked, "Don't you want to go back?" "No. No." The two of them said in unison. Seeing this, Emperor Qing did not say anything. Instead, he said, "Master left this time to handle some personal matters. At the same time, I also found weapons for all of you. This time, I've come to bring all of you over and personally retrieve them." Chapter 50-61. Hao and Mu-chen looked at each other and said, "Master, our mother is in seclusion." Seclusion. Emperor Qing paused and said, "With her current strength, who does she need to go into seclusion to deal with? Or is she going to do something earth-shattering again?" Mu-chen looked at him with the expression of a little adult. "Master, you should know that our father is still in the lower immortal realm. And it's not just our father, but many of our relatives are in the lower immortal realm. I heard from Mother that she wants to break the void boundary of the upper immortal realm so that the two realms can be connected." Hot Emperor Qing couldn't help but chuckle and said, "This seems like something your mother would do. However, this matter is not so simple." He put down the teacup in his hand and said, "The upper immortal world is different from the other places in the lower immortal world. Not only is there a difference in space, but there are also the 9 levels of the heavenly Tao. It is not so easy for her to connect the two worlds." "Master." A delicate and soft voice sounded at this time. Emperor Qing's eyes were gentle when he heard this voice. He looked at the entrance of the hall and saw the little girl running in like the wind and falling into his arms. "Master, Master, Yinchi missed you." Yu knew that she had run away secretly. Now that her master had come to find her, the first thing she did was to please him. She immediately jumped into his arms and didn't forget to rub her little head against his chest. Then she raised her head and showed a sweet smile. Emperor Qing's face was calm and no expression could be seen on his face. His deep and calm eyes were fixed on the little girl who was smiling sweetly. Hearing her words, he asked in a deep voice, "Did you miss your master?" "Yes, yes." Yu quickly nodded. "But why do I remember that you didn't listen to me and sneaked out of Cloud Sky Mountain?" His cold voice was deep and she couldn't tell whether he was happy or angry. Even his face didn't have any expression or gentleness. Seeing this, Yu's heart skipped a beat. She lowered her head guiltily and uneasily, and her little hand grabbed the corner of his clothes, not knowing what to say. Looking at her uneasy expression, Emperor Qing sighed in his heart and couldn't help but soften his voice. "Do you think you still dare to disobey Master?" Sneaking out of the mountain. Hearing this, she quickly raised her head and said, "I won't dare, I won't dare. Master, I'll definitely listen to Master in the future. If Master doesn't let me leave the mountain, I won't leave. Really, I promise. Remember what you said today." Emperor Qing looked at her and said, "Okay, okay." She nodded in response. Seeing his expression soften a little, she smiled and said, "Master, why are you here? Didn't you go to do something? Has the matter been settled? Are you going to take us back to the mountain?" "Master, my mother's place is so beautiful. Master, do you want to stay here for a few days? Sister Mi's cooking is so delicious, Master." "All right." Emperor Qing interrupted her words and said, "Master knows that you two want to stay by your mother's side, but don't forget that you two are still my disciples." Saying this, he said again, "You already have God-beating whip as your weapon. Yun Chen and Yun Yuan still don't have suitable weapons, so I'm going to take them to find a suitable sword. Then do I also have to go?" Yu blinked her eyes and asked. Chapter 50-62. Emperor Qing, are you going to take them away? Fengzhou's voice was heard. "Mother." Hao and the other two called out. They stood up and looked at her. Mu Chen asked, "Mother, aren't you in seclusion?" As he spoke, he saw whispering to him from the side of the main hall. She was the one who went to invite her over. Fengzhou smiled and walked forward. "I told to call me if there's anything. Since your master is here, even if I'm in seclusion, I have to come out and entertain him." She walked forward and sat down. Looking at Emperor Qing, she said, "Since you're here, why don't you stay for a few days?" Emperor Qing looked at her and said, "I'm going to take them to find a suitable weapon. We'll return to Cloud Sky Mountain directly, so I'll take Cloud 7 with me." He paused and said, "There's no need to stay for a while. We'll rest today and set off tomorrow." This was for Fengzhou and the three children. Fengzhou was startled by his words. He looked at him, then at Hao and Mu Chen. In fact, they also had weapons. Not only did the two of them have daggers, but they also had long swords that could cut through iron like mud. It was precisely because the swords they were using now were excellent that she didn't think of changing their swords. Thus, when she heard Emperor Qing's words, she was slightly surprised. Since Emperor Qing said that he was going to take them to find weapons, the weapons they would naturally obtain would be something that their current weapons could not compare to. She did not ask what kind of weapons he was going to find for them. Instead, she said, "In that case, I'll have to trouble you, Emperor Qing." They chatted for a while in the hall. Then, Fengzhou personally took Emperor Qing to the guest house to rest. He instructed the three children to accompany him and instructed me to prepare dishes to entertain the guests. The next morning, in front of the boundary at the entrance of the Immortal Island, the three children, who had packed up, followed Emperor Qing and looked at their mother reluctantly. "Listen to your master and cultivate diligently. Mother will visit you in the future if there's a chance," Fengzhou said to them. "And, Mother, don't worry. We will listen to Master's words." As the three of them spoke, they stood beside their master and did not move. They did not dare to throw themselves into their mother's arms, for fear that they would hug her tightly and not want to leave. "Emperor Qing, I'll leave the three of them to you." Fengzhou cupped his hands and bowed. "Yes." Emperor Qing replied. He glanced at the three children and said, "They are the most unstable at this age. If it is not necessary, it is better to avoid them." Fengzhou knew what he meant. She looked at the three children, nodded, and gave them a gentle smile. Mother, we will train hard and work hard to become stronger. Mu Qin said with a serious face, his voice solemn, as if he was making a promise. And, Mother knows. You are all good children. She was also reluctant to part with them, but she also knew that it was best for them to follow Emperor Qing. Mother, you will miss you. But in the future, you will not be able to sneak out to look for you. Mother, don't worry. You will be very obedient in the future. I won't let Master and Mother worry. The little girl also spoke. Fengzhou nodded. She was very pleased. Fengzhou. Chapter 50-63. As he spoke, his voice paused for a moment before he continued, there are many things. Many things are just obsessions. Hearing this, Fengzhou smiled and said, I know. I know what I'm doing. Seeing this, Emperor Qing did not say anything else. After bidding farewell to her, he left with the three children. After watching their figures disappear into the depths of the clouds in the sky, Fengzhou withdrew her gaze and turned back. Mistress, will they come again in the future? Mi-er saw that she had returned and went forward to ask. This is their home. Of course, they will come back in the future. But no one knows how many years it will be. She smiled and shook her head. She didn't say anything else. She turned around and headed back to her residence, preparing to go into seclusion again. Half a year later. On an island, Emperor Qing stood with his hands behind his back as he watched the sun rise in the east. He asked, Are you ready? Standing beside him was Mu Qin, who was dressed in a tight black robe. In the past half a year, he had grown about half a head taller. Despite his young age, he stood upright, his little face tense. His eyes were filled with determination. I'm ready. He spoke in a solemn and loud voice. And not far behind these two people, Hao and Yu stood there watching, but didn't approach. Emperor Qing turned to look at Mu Qin and asked, How many times have you gone down to the sea? And how many times have you touched the sword? Replying to Shizhuan, this is the 99th time. I've held the sword 11 times and couldn't pull it out. But this time, I'll definitely pull it out. Mu Chen's voice was firm. He looked at the sea in front of him. There was only one thought in his mind. This time, he must pull out the ancient divine sword, Long Yuan. Half a year ago, Master brought them from the Immortal Islands to this place. He told him that there was an ancient divine sword in the sea. It was called Long Yuan and asked him to pull it out. In the past 6 months, he had dived into the sea 99 times. Out of these 99 times, he had only managed to grab hold of the sword 11 times. As for the other times, he had either been unable to withstand the pressure and had no choice but to come back up, or he had been unable to find the sword. And those 11 times, when he found the sword and held it, he couldn't pull it out. But this time was different. This time, he believed that he could pull it out. This time is also the last time. If you can't pull it out, you won't have another chance. Emperor Qing looked at the sea in front of him. Go. Yes. Mu Qin pursed his lips and rose into the air, heading for the surface of the sea. After a distance, he took a deep breath and plunged into the sea. Seeing him enter the sea, Youth, who was not far away somewhat worriedly asked, Eldest senior brother, can second senior brother pull out that sword? He can do it. He looked at the sea in front of him. He believed that Mu Qin could pull out the sword. Yu didn't say anything. She just waited quietly and watched. Some cultivators further away saw the child going into the sea again and couldn't help but laugh. Look, that child went into the sea again. How many times has it been? What do you think he's after? Maybe there's some treasure in the sea. Chapter 50-64. The cultivators were discussing over there. Since they didn't know who was next to them, they didn't hold back. This sea area was backed by the ferocious beast forest. Other than some cultivators who entered the forest to hunt ferocious beasts, this sea area was also a place for cultivators to rest and search for treasures. After all, there were many treasures in the sea that others didn't know about. Of course, there were also many unknown dangers. Mu Chen, who had dived into the deep sea, was wrapped in a spiritual aura. When he reached the bottom of the sea, his ancient mythical beast aura was naturally released. This was because in the depths of the sea, especially in the central area, there were many sea beasts swimming in the water to hunt for food. In order to avoid fighting, he released his ancient mythical beast aura when he reached the depths of the sea to make the sea beasts stay far away from him. After an unknown period of time, he came to a dark place below. There, a sword was stuck in a huge rock. If one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't have noticed the existence of the sword. He went forward and held the sword. Injecting spiritual aura into his palm, he tried to pull it out. However, the sword still didn't move at all. After staying underwater for too long, his ears hurt a little. Especially under the pressure of the deep sea, his whole body was uncomfortable. He tried again and again, trying to pull the sword out, but to no avail. The pain from his eardrums and eyes, as well as the immense pain that felt like a knife digging into his brain and the lack of air, all made him know that he had to go up. However, he didn't want to give up like this because he knew that this was his last chance. If he couldn't pull the sword out this time, he wouldn't have another chance. His hand tightly gripped the sword hilt. Exerting strength again and again, it only made him more uncomfortable. His vision gradually blurred. On the beach, Hao and Yun Ruoyan looked at each other. The two of them stood beside Emperor Qing and looked at the calm surface of the sea without any movement. Hao couldn't help but ask, "Master, can second senior brother pull the sword out? He's been down for so long, will he be able to take it?" "Master, Yun Yuan has been down for longer than before. I'm afraid he won't be able to take it after such a long time at the bottom of the sea." Hao was also worried. Yun Yuan had been down for too long. Without the water avoidance pearl, even a cultivator couldn't stay in the deep sea for too long. Emperor Qing looked at the sea and said, "You think he's going to pull the sword out?" The two of them were startled and asked, "Isn't it?" Emperor Qing shook his head and said with his hands behind his back, "The ancient dragon abyss sword has always been the sword's master. You should know that all swords will choose their masters. I let him try again and again because I want to know if the ancient dragon abyss sword will choose its master. If he could just pull them out and take them away, why would he need to go to Fengzhou's place and bring them here?" Chapter 50-65. In her opinion, the sword worn by such an outstanding person like her brother should be an ancient magical sword like what her master said. Otherwise, it would not be worthy of her brother. However, if this sword did not choose her brother, then when she grew up in the future, she would pull this sword out and refine it again. At the same time, in the pitch-black seabed, a ray of light gradually appeared. The light was emitted by the Long Yuan sword. At this time, Mu Chen could not hold on and fainted. However, his hand was still tightly holding the Long Yuan sword and his whole body was leaning against it. What he did not see was that the Long Yuan sword that was inserted into the huge rock flew out of the rock at this moment. The sword that was originally covered with moss and rust was baptized by the light emitted by the sword at this moment and became very sharp. The long sword flew out and directly brought the fainted Hao out of the seabed. At that moment, the entire sea shook and the waves surged. The ground also faintly shook, making it difficult for people to stand steadily. What happened? Could it be that the earth dragon turned over? Some cultivators cried out in alarm and quickly supported the people around them as they quickly retreated. There were also cultivators who were shaken by the violent tremors and fell onto the sand. It was also at this moment that someone cried out in alarm and pointed towards the sea. Ah! Quickly look, what is that? In the sky above the sea, a fiery cloud condensed at this time. The cloud spread over the sea and faintly scattered the light on the sea. On the sea, the roaring waves crashed. Then, a whirlpool of water rolled up from the sea and a sharp sword emitting a sharp sword aura flew out of the sea with a little boy who was completely drenched. With a whoosh, it flew to the beach by the sea. Its senior brother. And that sword. Yu-er cheered in surprise and jumped up. When Hao-er saw him and the sword come out, his heart relaxed. Then, he became nervous again. He seems to have fainted. The Qing Emperor looked on and did not say anything. He only glanced at the clouds and then his gaze fell on the sword and Mu Qin. He watched as the ancient divine sword brought him to the beach and then put him down. The sword also fell beside him. At this moment, under the sunlight, everyone could see that the body of the sword was suffused with a layer of flowing light. The body of the sword was like the starry sky in the night sky, deep and mysterious, but also like a coiling dragon, emitting a powerful and fierce aura and an intimidating light. An anomaly has appeared in the sky. An ancient divine weapon has appeared. Hiss. This is actually the ancient dragon abyss divine sword. A cultivator with sharp eyes recognized the sword and couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. His eyes widened as he stared in disbelief at the treasured sword next to the child. Ancient Dragon Abyss Divine Sword. Could it be that you're mistaken? Ever since its previous owner perished, the whereabouts of that sword have been unknown. There are rumors that the ancient Dragon Abyss sword has been sealed away, and it's impossible for it to appear in the world again. It can't be wrong, it can't be wrong. I recognize it. There's a picture of the ancient Dragon Abyss sword in the picture book of famous ancient swords. I recognize it. It can't be wrong. The cultivator said loudly, as if he was dissatisfied with being denied. Not to mention whether this was the ancient Dragon Abyss divine sword or not, just the appearance of the sky and the appearance of the sword from the bottom of the sea and carrying the child out, they knew that this was definitely a treasure. Chapter 50-66. This master and his disciples had come to this seaside for a few months. Only the master brought the 3 children. They didn't know which sect they belonged to, but they let the little boy go into the sea every day. They all saw this, but they didn't know what they wanted to do. There were also busybodies who quietly followed them, but they didn't find anything in the sea. They didn't expect to see the birth of an ancient magic sword today. Someone was about to step forward, but at this moment, they saw the little boy's master and a few others walking over. Second senior brother. Yu-er quickly ran forward, and seeing his whole body was dripping wet, moreover he was still unconscious, she promptly checked him and pressed his stomach. Not long after, she saw him spitting out a mouthful of water, then lightly coughing. He also slowly opened his eyes. Seeing that he woke up, Hao-er was relieved. He hurriedly used his spiritual power to help him dry the water stains on his body. He asked, "How is it? Do you feel better?" Mu Qin nodded and looked at his master who was walking towards him. He couldn't help but lower his head in shame. "Master, this disciple is useless. I couldn't pull out the sword." He tried again and again, but he couldn't pull out the sword. In the end, he even fainted, and his master had to go down to save him. Well, at this moment, he still didn't know that the ancient magic sword had carried him up. He thought that he had fainted in the sea and his master had gone down to save him. Hearing this, the Qing Emperor's lips curled up slightly, revealing an imperceptible smile. Second senior brother, what do you think this is? Yu said with a smile, hinting him to look at the sword that was inserted at the side. It's this sword that brought you out of the sea. Hao also revealed a smile. Mu Qin was startled and looked to the side. When his line of sight fell on the long yuan sword, he couldn't help but be stunned. He was somewhat astonished. I clearly remember that I didn't pull it out. The ancient magic sword Long Yuan, how can you pull it out just because you want to? It has always been the case that a famed sword chooses its master, not the other way around, said Great Emperor Qing in a deep voice. He looked at the Long Yuan sword, walked towards it and pulled it out. He condensed some qi on his finger and passed it to Mu Qin. He then said, "From now on, this sword belongs to you." "Thank you, master." Mu Qin's heart was moved. He took the Long Yuan sword with both hands and stood up. "Second senior brother, quickly drip your blood to recognize me as your master," Yu said while beaming with smiles. She was also very happy in her heart. Her brother had also found a very good weapon. Thus, under the envious gazes of the surrounding cultivators, Mu Qin dripped his blood on the sword to claim ownership. After claiming ownership, he felt an indescribable feeling with the Dragon Abyss sword in his hand. "Master, second senior brother obtained such a good sword, then what about eldest senior brother?" Yu asked with a beaming smile. Her brother had the ancient magic sword Long Yuan, and she had the holy whip. Master had found first-class treasures for them. At this moment, she couldn't help but look forward to their brother's weapon. His sword is naturally extraordinary, Great Emperor Qing said as he looked into the distance with his hands behind his back. He then looked at Hao and said, "Let's go. I'll take you to get it." "Yes." Hao replied with a smile on his face. His heart was filled with anticipation. Chapter 50-67. Looking at this scene, the Qing Emperor could not help but sneer. "You want to find the Long Yuan sword?" How many years had it been? There were actually people who dared to block his path. It seemed that he really did not come out much. May I know which sect you are from?" A middle-aged cultivator said with a smile and cupped his hands. Seeing that he had no intention of speaking, he said, "Actually, we just want to borrow this ancient divine sword Long Yuan to take a look. After all, it's an ancient divine sword. We're really curious." "You think you are worthy?" the Qing Emperor said indifferently. His deep and calm gaze swept across them. He was neither happy nor angry, but it made their hearts tremble for no reason. "That's right, you think you are worthy," Yu said disdainfully and made a face at them. "The Long Yuan sword belongs to my senior brother. Why should I let you see it?" "Humph. These people are shameless. They obviously want to snatch the sword, but they say they just want to borrow it to take a look. They are too shameless." You have 3 children with you. I feel that if your disciple were to hold on to the Long Yuan sword, he would not be able to keep it, and might even bring about a fatal disaster. Why don't you hand it over to us?" the middle-aged cultivator said again. What he meant was that even if he had a good cultivation, he still had 3 children with him. If they really fought, they would not be able to gain any advantage. Rather than being killed in the end, why not give it to him first? Hearing this, the corners of Emperor Qing's lips curled up slightly, revealing an indifferent smile. However, there was still no trace of a smile in his calm and deep eyes. Only his voice, which was filled with a hint of coldness, rang out unhurriedly. Are you looking down on my 3 disciples? Fine, since you are courting death, what's wrong with sending you on your way? As his voice fell, he looked at his 3 disciples and said, "Get rid of them." Yes. The 3 of them responded in unison. At this moment, the cultivators who had surrounded them and wanted to steal their things were definitely not good people. In fact, if they wanted to steal the Long Yuan sword, they would have to kill Mu Qin to break the connection between the Long Yuan sword and his divine sense. Therefore, killing them would not be a psychological burden to the 3 of them. They had always adhered to the principle of "don't attack unless you're attacked." This was taught by their mother and their master. If someone dared to bully them, they could only fight back fiercely. When the cultivators heard that the 3 children were going to deal with them, they were all stunned for a moment. Then, they all laughed in unison. Ha 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 ha. Did I hear wrongly? Let 3 children send us on our way. Which mountain did this person come from? What a fool who had never seen the world. You want to kill us with just 3 kids. What a joke. Hearing them scolding her master, Yu couldn't help but walk forward. Her small face exposed a beaming smile, but her eyes however were suffused with killing intent. Scolding my master. Is my master someone you can scold? As soon as her voice fell, her small figure instantly swept out towards the cultivator who laughed and called her master a fool. She did not use a whip. Instead, she held a dagger in her hand. Once she attacked, it was a fatal killing move. Whoosh! Be careful. Chapter 50-68. The cultivator who was pulled away saw the sharp blade cut across his throat. The fierce murderous aura caused his face to turn pale, and a trace of fear rose in his heart. If he hadn't dodged just now, he would have died on the spot. He immediately put away his contempt and carelessness and became vigilant. It was also at this moment that he saw the little girl lean forward again, and the dagger in her hand attacked his fatal spot. Hao and Mu Qin also attacked at this moment. There were about a dozen cultivators surrounding them, and with their strength, it was not a problem to deal with them. Mu Qin waved the Long Yuan sword in his hand, and a sharp sword aura burst out from the blade. The sword aura attacked, and the 2 cultivators couldn't help but retreat. The Qing Supreme the Arch stood there and watched with his hands behind his back. He didn't help and only watched the 3 of them fight the dozen cultivators together. Looking at their skills and combat strength, he secretly nodded. Talent was indeed extremely important. The 3 of them had extraordinary talent, and their cultivation speed was faster than ordinary cultivators. Their comprehension ability was also not low. With such combat strength at such a young age, they would naturally be even more outstanding when they grew up. He stood there and looked as if he was watching them fight there, but his thoughts drifted a little. It wasn't until someone roared and slashed at him with a sword that he regained his senses. Go to hell. Perhaps it was the red blood from the corpses on the ground that stung his eyes, or perhaps it was the 3 children who didn't even blink when they killed. But at this moment, the cultivator, in the instant that he lost his mind, actually swung his sword at the man who stood there motionless with his hands behind his back. You dare to attack my master. You're courting death. She turned around and saw that the cultivator was actually slashing at their master with a sword. She was furious for a moment. Although she knew that the person couldn't hurt their master, his action still angered her. She held the dagger in her other hand, and a whip struck out with a swoosh, wrapping around the long sword that was coming down and pulling it back far away. At the same time, she withdrew the whip and lashed it at the person with a swoosh. Who told you to attack my master? Swoosh. The young and tender voice was filled with anger. Along with the voice, the sound of the whip striking the cultivator's body could be heard along with the sound of air flowing through the air. Those who were watching from a distance felt a chill run from the soles of their feet to their hearts when they saw the scene in front of them. Although they also wanted that ancient divine sword, they clearly knew that the man with the 3 children was most likely not an ordinary person. Therefore, when those cultivators surrounded them, they didn't go forward. They only wanted to see if those cultivators could snatch the long yuan sword from those people. Unexpectedly, the man didn't even need to do anything. Just the 3 disciples by his side were enough to completely destroy the dozen or so cultivators. That's the Azure Emperor. Chapter 5069. It was only when the last cultivator fell to the ground with his eyes wide open in shock that the surroundings quieted down. No one spoke, and only the sound of waves could be heard. The 3 experienced cultivators quickly cleaned up the battlefield. After collecting the spoils of war, they returned to their master's side. The Lotus Emperor glanced at the corpses on the ground and said to the 3 people beside him, "Let's go." With that, he led them away. The cultivators watched as they turned into a few streaks of light and left. Only then did they relax. They broke out in cold sweat and were terrified. The Lotus Emperor. That was the Lotus Emperor. The Lotus Emperor left with his 3 disciples. From that day onwards, the news gradually spread. A strange phenomenon appeared in the sky. The ancient divine sword Long Yuan appeared and recognized its master. The Lotus Emperor's 2nd disciple, Yun Yuan. After a month, it was announced that the ancient divine sword Red Cloud Sword was obtained by the Lotus Emperor's eldest disciple, Yun Chen. For a time, all the sects and clans in the upper immortal world were shocked. No one had expected that the Azure Emperor, who had not appeared in the world for a long time, would first obtain the deity-beating whip as a defensive weapon for his youngest disciple. Subsequently, he obtained the Crimson Sky Sword and Dragon Abyss Sword for his eldest disciple and 2nd disciple. No matter who heard of such extravagance, they would be extremely shocked. One had to know that ancient divine swords were not easily obtained. Furthermore, no one knew the whereabouts of the 2 swords. No one expected the Lotus Emperor to know where the 2 swords were. For a time, while everyone was shocked, they also secretly inquired about the origins of the 3 disciples of the Lotus Emperor. Because everyone knew that those who could be recognized by the ancient divine swords would definitely have extraordinary achievements in the future. Therefore, they wanted to find out about their origins as soon as possible so that they could be on good terms with their clans. In the Immortal Island, Fengzhou, who had come out of seclusion, also heard the news. The news was first received by Tai Song and Mi Er. Although one of them was often refining weapons at the back of the mountain and the other was often in the kitchen researching new dishes, the 2 of them were very well informed about the outside world. Fengzhou was eating in the courtyard as he listened to Mi Er speak. The news has already spread outside that the Azure Emperor's 1st disciple and 2nd disciple both obtained ancient divine swords. I heard from Uncle Tai that those are top-notch treasures. Fengzhou finished the last bowl of soup and put it down. He wiped the corners of his mouth and said, "Emperor Qing treats them very well. He even found such a rare sword for them." Seeing that she had eaten her fill, Mi Er went up to clean up and asked, "Mistress, are you still going into seclusion?" Fengzhou smiled, stood up, and said, "No, I have something to do. While I'm not here, you guys have to take care of this place." "All right," Mi Er replied. She didn't ask her what she was going to do. She packed her things and prepared to leave. In the past year, her cultivation had been constantly making breakthroughs. Recently, she also felt that she was about to advance. She reckoned that after her master left, she could also prepare to go into seclusion to advance. Furthermore, since master was not on the island, no one else would come here. Even if they did, they could wait for some time before coming again. Therefore, this period of time was the best time to advance. Chapter 50-70. Thank you, Master. Miha regained her senses and smiled happily. She quickly took it and put it away. Tell Tai Song and Yun Yang that if they need any refining materials, ask them to send someone to send them over or buy them themselves, Fingzhou said. Okay, I'll let them know, Miha nodded. He didn't ask how long she would be gone. When would she be back? She believed that Master would be back as soon as he finished his task. If it was as usual, he would be gone for a few months at most. On this day, Fingzhou came to the forest in the fairy island. She set up a transmission array here. It was an ancient transmission array. She used her spiritual aura and natal heavenly fire to set up the complex pattern. As the array was completed, the moment her spiritual aura flowed according to the pattern, the flame burst into flames and a powerful light burst out. At this moment, she walked into the array and sat down cross-legged. The spiritual energy in her body surged and gathered in her hands. Her spiritual energy was released at this moment and locked onto the void in front of her. When she tried to open the void with her spiritual energy, she felt a mouthful of blood gushing out from her throat. Pfft! She suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. As she spat out a mouthful of blood, the runes on the formation she was sitting on gradually dimmed and the flames extinguished. The surrounding spirit force aura also dissipated at this moment. She felt a pain in her chest. She gently exhaled to ease the pain in her chest. She raised her hand to wipe away the blood at the corner of her mouth. With a flip of her palm, a pill appeared in her hand. She then threw it into her mouth and swallowed it. The green lotus chi in her body began to circulate slowly, healing her body. After a long while, she gently exhaled and murmured, "No wonder the Qing Emperor used someone else's body when he went to the lower immortal world. It turns out that it really is this difficult." She had used about a year's time to prepare. However, she had not expected that she would be injured by the powerful backlash of the power of heaven and earth as soon as she tried to open the void. Could it be that people who have ascended really can't go back to the lower immortal realm? No, that's impossible. According to that ancient record, everything is possible. As she spoke, she closed her eyes. She must have done something wrong. She believed that there must be a way, as long as she found the way. What she didn't expect was that while she was trying to calculate, she was completely immersed in it. This experiment lasted for 3 years. Time passed quickly in the mountains. For cultivators, 3 years passed in the blink of an eye. Especially for someone like Fingzhou, who was almost obsessed with his research, there was no distinction between day and night. Even me, Tai Song, and Yun Yang, who were also on the immortal island, didn't know that their mistress, who said she was going out, had actually stayed in the immortal island's forest for 3 years, let alone the outsiders who didn't know. As for those contracted beasts, they knew that their master had gone to the forest. However, their master had ordered them to guard the immortal island. Therefore, they didn't tell anyone about what happened in the forest. They knew that their master was trying to open a door to the immortal realm in the 9 heavens realm. Chapter 50-71. In the forest, Fingzhou sat cross-legged on the ground near the formation. With a wave of her hand, a pure spiritual aura condensed in her hand and condensed in the void as she formed a seal with her hand. At the formation where she sat, the complex ancient pattern emitted a dazzling light. Within this light, there was a faint trace of green aura flowing, as well as a wisp of ancient aura. "Open!" she shouted in a low voice. With a wave of her hand, a vortex formed by flames appeared in front of her. At the edge of the vortex formed by flames, the flames formed a circle of ancient patterns. In the middle of the vortex, there was a dark green color rotating, and the bottom could not be seen. Looking at the vortex that appeared in the void, she could not help but be overjoyed. A joyful smile appeared on her face. I did it. I finally did it. Who said that the formation in the 9 heavens could not be opened? Who said that the next step would be the 9 heavens? Now, in the ancient formation, the immortal path has been opened. Delighted, she stood up with a smile. However, she discovered that her red dress had been torn due to her repeated experiments in the past 3 years. Her black hair had grown a lot longer, and there were even some fallen leaves on her body. Seeing this, she smiled. Looking at the flame teleportation immortal path in front of her, she waved her sleeve and closed it. Even if she wanted to go, she should tidy herself up before going. Otherwise, she would scare them with her current appearance. Looking down at her appearance, she smiled and shook her head. Although she could use immortal techniques to cleanse her body, she still thought that it would be better to take a bath. Thus, she stepped out of the formation under her feet, removed the barrier around her, and walked towards a waterfall in the forest, in the sea region of the lower immortal realm. What Fingzhou did not know was that in the past 3 years, in the sea region of the lower immortal realm, Xianyuan Mo's immortal body had already formed. There were faint signs of him waking up. In this sea region, Du Fan and the others still took turns to guard. They did not forget to cultivate, hoping that one day, they would be able to ascend successfully like their master and go to the side of the upper immortal realm. Everyone cultivated with this goal in mind. However, with their cultivation, it was extremely difficult to ascend. It could even be said that the hope was extremely slim. Perhaps they would not be able to ascend successfully for the rest of their lives and would remain at their current level of strength. A figure flew over on a sword from afar, swept across the sea, and landed near the flying ship. Lang Hua Luo Yu, long time no see. Guan Shilin landed near the flying ship and laughed. His deep voice was full of energy. In these years, his cultivation had become more profound. However, ascension was still out of reach for him. Furthermore, his family, his wife and children were all here. He could not bear to leave them. And leave them were his family. Ascension, although his cultivation, his wife, and children were, his family, and his family. It's been a few years. Why did you think of coming here? Luo Yu was talking to Lang Hua. When he saw that it was Guan Shilin, he could not help but walk up with a smile. He patted him on the shoulder and looked him up and down. He smiled and said, I haven't seen you for a few years. You seem to have put on weight. It seems that you've been living a good life. Hearing this, Guan Shilin laughed. I haven't had much to do in the past few years, so I thought I'd come and see you. By the way, how's Moses' place? It's been a few years. Is there still no news? Chapter 50-72. Yes, Hui Lang and Ying Yi are now taking care of the Yama Lord's world. A few days ago, they received news that the aura there has stabilized a lot, and their master's divine sense has also become much stronger. I heard that they would come over to take a look, so they'll probably be here in the next few days. Luo Yu smiled and said to him, You came all the way here. Go inside and rest for a while. Lang Hua will take care of you. I have to take some people to patrol the sea. I haven't been here for a long time, so I'll go with you. I also want to go down to the sea to check on Moses' situation. Guan Shilin said. Seeing this, Luo Yu and Lang Hua looked at each other and smiled. All right, let's go together. With that, the three of them took some people to patrol the sea. After a few rounds, the two of them took Guan Shilin into the sea. In the deep sea, in the place separated by Fengzhou's enchantment, the originally illusory figure had solidified. His aura was no longer weak and ethereal, as if he could die at any time. Even though they couldn't get close to him through the enchantment, they could feel that his aura was getting stronger. Because of the enchantment, they couldn't get close. After looking down for a while, they left and returned to the surface of the sea, heading back to the spaceship. They chatted on the ship, asking each other about what had happened in the past few years. The one who talked the most was Fingzhou. So many years have passed in the blink of an eye. I wonder how Xiaojiu and the others are doing now. It's really difficult to know how she's doing with the 9 heavens. Guan Shilin sighed softly. With Master's ability, I think he'll be able to live well no matter where he goes. Leng Hua looked at the sea and said, however, the Yama Lord is still here. She once said that as long as she can think of a way to come back, she'll still come back to take a look. Guan Shilin nodded but didn't say much. Come back. Easier said than done. They were separated by the 9 heavens. If they could open up a heavenly path, there wouldn't be no cultivators from the immortal world who came here for so many years. Right, why don't I see Leng Hua and the others? Aren't they here with you? Guan Shilin looked around and didn't see anyone else. Leng Hua smiled warmly and said, my sister and Qin Xan have gone to the city to buy some things, they'll probably be back. It's rare for you to come here, so we'll prepare a good meal for you tonight. There are many delicious beast fishes in the sea. I'll get someone to go down and catch a big one. Luo Yu waved his hand to summon a phoenix guard and gave him some instructions. Ha ha ha, I'm planning to stay here for a few more days. Since I'm here, I won't leave so soon. These days, what haven't I eaten in the sea? You guys have to get more. If I can't finish it, I can bring it back to them. Guan Shilin laughed heartily and took out 2 jars of wine from his space, saying, I know you don't have any good wine here. Look, I brought 2 jars. Come, let me pour some for you to try. Luo Yu and Leng Hua looked at each other and smiled, saying, we won't drink much wine now. After all, we can't make any mistakes while guarding this sea area. But we can have a few cups. Chapter 50-73. That's true, but it's better to be careful. After all, Master is no longer here. If anything happens, we'll have to deal with it. Luo Yu said seriously, maybe you didn't pay much attention to the various heaven realms when you were at the old mansion, but we recently received news that some sovereigns have become restless and are ready to make a move. Hearing this, Guan Shilin was slightly startled. He frowned and said, is there anyone who dares to make a move on you? Not to mention that Xiaojiu is not here, just based on your strength, any one of you is enough to shock the experts from all over. Who would dare to make a move? They probably saw that Master has ascended to the immortal realm and won't be able to come back, so they made a move. Leng Hua said gently as he poured tea for the 2. Some sovereigns of the heaven realms have recently been annexing other regions to strengthen their power. Although no one dares to make a move on Master's territory, they have already set their eyes on it. We received news that several groups of people have been watching over the pill house for some time. Because of this, Fan Lin and the others are staying there and not making a move. Luo Yu took a sip of tea and said, it's just that this hasn't happened yet, so I didn't tell you. I also didn't want you to worry. If those people really do make a move, with our strength, we can still deal with it. Guan Shilin's face darkened and he frowned. He looked at the 2 of them and said, this is your fault. How can you not tell me something like this has happened? In any case, I'm Little Nine's brother. Now that Little Nine isn't here, if her businesses are really targeted by someone, I have to stand up for her no matter what. Don't worry. If such a day really comes, I'll definitely tell you. Luo Yu said with a smile. Just as they were talking, there was a loud bang. It was as if a huge rock had fallen on the surface of the sea, causing countless splashes of water. What happened? Luo Yu immediately stood up and turned to the bow of the ship, looking at the sea. A Phoenix guard quickly returned and reported, "Captain, something fell from the sky into the sea. 2 Phoenix guards have already gone down to check it out." Why would something fall from the Eastern Sea spiritual region for no reason? "Did you see what it was?" Guan Shilin asked. "That thing came very quickly, I couldn't see it clearly." The Phoenix guard shook his head and said, "Look." Leng Hua suddenly said, his voice carrying a trace of astonishment. The few of them looked in the direction he was pointing at and saw that there seemed to be a whirlpool spinning on the surface of the sea. The whirlpool spun bigger and bigger as it went deeper into the sea. "Let's go and take a look," Luo Yu said. He immediately gathered his qi and headed towards the vortex. However, at that moment, the sound of drums came from behind the clouds. They were startled when they heard it. They raised their heads and saw that the people behind the clouds were gradually revealing themselves. The black mass of troops were all wearing armor and holding weapons in their hands as they stood in the clouds. In front of the white clouds, 3 drummers were beating on 3 large drums. The rhythmic beats of the drums reverberated through half the sky. Dong! 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 Dong 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 dong. Chapter 5074. War Drums. Luo Yu narrowed his eyes, a cold, murderous glint flashing across his eyes. "It looks like they're here to declare war on us." He stared at the 8 people in the lead. He had seen a few of them before. They were the sovereigns of other heaven realms. When his master had ascended, they had come to congratulate him. However, he did not expect that in just a few years, they would come with war drums. That whirlpool is still going down. That's where the Yama Lord's immortal body is. If the whirlpool continues to go down, I'm afraid it will disturb him, Leng Hua said with a slight frown. "I'll go get that thing out." As Guan Shilin spoke, he gathered his qi and prepared to dive into the sea. Unexpectedly, just as he was about to dive into the sea, a sovereign blocked his path. "I've long heard that the Phoenix Master's sworn brother, Guan Shilin, is quite powerful even though he's a mystic. I'd like to experience it for myself today." The person who spoke held a large saber in his hand. Seeing that his path was blocked, Guan Shilin's expression darkened. He stared at the person in front of him and asked sternly, "Who are you? Don't you know where this is? How dare you come here to cause trouble? I think you're tired of living." He really didn't expect that these people would be unable to hold themselves back even though Xiao Jiao had only ascended for a few years. When Luo Yu spoke earlier, he didn't dare to believe it. He didn't expect that even people would come. Who was supporting these people? Who gave them the guts? How dare they come here to cause trouble? Ha 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 ha. Who doesn't know that the Phoenix Master is unparalleled? Who doesn't know that the Phoenix Master is renowned? As long as it's a cultivator, there's no one who doesn't know her name. The burly cultivator looked up to the sky and laughed loudly. His voice contained spiritual power, and after it spread out, it paused. He glanced at Guan Shilin in front of him and revealed an inexplicable smile. However, the Phoenix Master has already ascended for several years. Even if I, Lei Tang, am not talented, I know that ascending to the immortal realm is separated by 9 heavens. Even if the Phoenix Master succeeds in ascending and becomes a great emperor, she will never be able to return to this world in this lifetime. At this point, the smile on his face gradually widened, and his eyes flashed with ambition. He said, "Fengzhou did ascend, but she left all of you behind to help her manage the world. However, Fengzhou is no longer in this world. Even if Fengzhou is no." As soon as he finished speaking, the cultivator named Lei Ting waved the long saber in his hand and attacked Guan Shilin. He shouted, "Today, let this monarch kill first. With Guan Shilin's blood, I'll cheer you all." A strong pressure accompanied by a fierce murderous aura swept out. Above the clouds, the war drums became louder and louder. Every beat seemed to step on every note. Every beat fell into the hearts of the crowd and spread into their ears. How arrogant! I'd like to see if you have the ability to let the blood of Guan Shilin dye the East Sea Spirit region red. Guan Shilin shouted loudly. His dark force aura surged along with a strong fighting spirit. He stretched out his hand and a long saber appeared in his hand. He held the saber in one hand and pointed it diagonally at the sea. At the same time, his figure swept out like a shadow and attacked the opponent.
Chapter 50-75. High up in the clouds, the South City Sovereign stood with the other sovereigns. When he heard Luo Yu's words, his eyes flashed and he said, "Luo Yu, it's not that I want to be your enemy. It's just that we are all serving our own masters." Serving our own masters? Luo Yu and Len Hua's hearts skipped a beat when they heard this. They looked at each other and Luo Yu said in a low voice, "As a sovereign, you are in charge of a territory. How can you be serving your own masters? Could it be? Dead people don't need to know too much." One of the sovereigns said as he glanced at the South City Sovereign and said, "Just kill them and take Xianyuan Mo's away. There's no need to talk to them." After he finished speaking, he smiled mysteriously and said, "I heard that Luo Yu is one of the 8 Phoenix Guards under Fengjiu. Why don't we let the South City Sovereign deal with him?" The South City Sovereign looked at Luo Yu and said, "Sovereign Yuanling is powerful. Why don't you show us?" "Ha! Since that's the case, Southern Qing Monarch, watch carefully and see how I take his life." As the Sovereign spoke, a light flashed and in the blink of an eye, his palm was already aimed at Luo Yu's face. When Luo Yu saw this, he did not avoid it. Instead, he gathered spiritual power in his palm and struck out. The palm that contained spiritual power instantly enlarged in mid-air and hit Sovereign Yuanling's attack with a bang. Bang! When the two palms collided, there was a loud sound of impact. The moment the sound was heard, the two airflows dispersed in the air and the waves on the sea surged up by a few hundred feet. Splash! As the waves around the two of them splashed, the two figures also collided head-on. Both of them were extremely powerful people. At this moment, they were exchanging blows. Powerful airflows spread around the two of them. The killing intent from their palms hit the sea surface and made loud banging sounds. Sovereign Yuanling was not weak. However, Luo Yu was one of the 8 Phoenix Guards under Fengjiu. His skills were all trained by her. How could he be compared to others? Especially in a one-on-one situation like this. Not long after the two of them clashed, Luo Yu sent out a palm strike, which landed heavily on Yuanling Sovereign's chest. Bang! With a loud bang, Sovereign Yuanling, who had been full of confidence earlier, felt a sharp pain in his chest, as if all his organs had been displaced. Blood spurted out from his chest, straight to his throat, and then he spat it out. Pooh! He was sent flying dozens of meters away. When he landed on the surface of the sea, he spat out a mouthful of blood, causing some people in the clouds to cry out in alarm. Monarch! A figure rushed out and quickly went to the place where he was shot down to support him, preventing him from falling into the deep sea. Sovereign Yuanling is just a so-so. Luo Yu said coldly.
With a flick of his sleeve, a sharp sword appeared in his hand. He pointed it at the sea. He stared coldly at the other sovereigns and said, "Who else wants to come down and fight? I, Luo Yu, will accompany you to the end." The war drum sounded, as if to encourage Sovereign Lei Ting, who was fighting Guan Shilin on the other side. However, Sovereign Lei Ting was retreating more and more. Chapter 5076. Take a stab from your Grandpa Guan. Ha! He waved the long saber in his hand and a sharp and powerful saber aura slashed towards his opponent. It was as ferocious as a tiger coming down from the mountains, sharp and unstoppable. The saber slashed down with irresistible force, extremely ferocious. A strong saber chi and a strong fighting spirit burst out from his body. Yuan Ling's sovereign's heart skipped a beat. He instinctively wanted to dodge, but unexpectedly, his dodging speed was not as fast as the saber chi that was about to strike him. Ah! A shrill scream suddenly rang out. An arm was chopped off and flew out, spinning a few rounds in the air before being thrown into the sea. Scarlet blood splashed out at that moment, sprinkling from mid-air to the surface of the sea, like little plum blossoms blooming in the sea before disappearing in an instant. The sound of the war drums suddenly stopped at this moment, as if they had not expected this scene. The three cultivators who were beating the drums stared with their eyes wide open and their hands stopped beating the drums. Hiss! Guan Shilin. You and I are irreconcilable. Lord Yuan Ling screamed and roared, his voice mixed with strong hatred and murderous intent. He covered his chopped-off arm with one hand, blood gushing out like a fountain, seeping into his palm and staining his robe red. Whoosh! Guan Shilin pointed his long saber at the sea and stared fiercely at the man with strong battle intent, saying, irreconcilable. Ha! Today, you will die under my saber, and your blood will dye the spirit East Sea red. As soon as he finished speaking, he gathered his chi and flew into the air. His whole body was like a shooting arrow, piercing and unstoppable. Quick! Help me! Lord Yuan Ling's expression changed. He held his chopped-off arm and quickly retreated, crying out in alarm and asking the other sovereigns in the clouds for help. The few of them looked at each other, and only then did they head down, splitting into several groups to go and help. This time, they were ordered to come, and they were all sovereigns. Naturally, they were wary of Fengzhou's subordinates. Since they had no chance of winning 1-on-1, they would fight 2-on-1, or even 3-on-1. They didn't believe that they wouldn't be able to deal with them if they worked together. Leng Hua, who was standing at the bow of the ship, saw that Guan Shilin and Luo Yu each had 2 or 3 sovereigns working together to deal with them. On the surface of the sea, the whirlpool was getting deeper and deeper. He was worried that the Yama Lord would be alarmed by the temperature difference in the sea, so he immediately jumped into the sea. Stop him! One of the sovereigns ordered his men to stop Leng Hua, who was heading towards the sea. Just as he finished speaking, the cultivators they brought with them jumped down at this moment. Some of them fought against the Phoenix Guards, while others dove into the sea to stop Leng Hua. The sound of war drums rang out. Both sides were engaged in battle, their battle intent thick. The battle in the Spirit East Sea and the sound of war drums spread, alarming many experts. Some nearby people came to watch. When they saw that it was a battle between sovereigns, they were shocked and didn't dare to get close. They only retreated to a distance to watch. At the same time, because the war drums shook half the sky, Leng Hua, Qin Xan, and Yi Feifei rushed back as fast as they could. At the same time, they also quickly informed the others. In the sea, he dived into the sea and saw that the thing drilling was like a huge iron umbrella. Its powerful aura was accompanied by a terrifying airflow as it drilled into the depths of the sea. When the iron umbrella drilled into the bottom and touched the defensive boundary, its speed decreased significantly and became slower. Chapter 5077. Leng Hua's pupils constricted. He knew that this umbrella was not an ordinary item. At this moment, the tip of the umbrella contained a powerful airflow that was drilling into the barrier. He was worried that if he did not stop it, the barrier would be broken by this primeval chaos treasure umbrella. However, just as he was about to step forward, the surrounding cultivators surrounded him and attacked him with weapons in their hands. For a moment, it was even more difficult for him to avoid the siege of those people in the water and go to the primeval chaos treasure umbrella. As they fought in the sea, the waves surged, and blood seeped out and dissolved in the sea. Beside Fingzhou, Ling Hua was considered to be the slowest cultivator. His cultivation was not as good as Luo Yu's. At this moment, he was surrounded by those cultivators in the sea. His body was cut by sword qi, and blood dyed his beige robe red. Clang. A sharp sound of a zither suddenly came. Before anyone could see the person, the sound wave had already attacked the cultivators who were fighting with the Phoenix Guards. At the same time, the lightning eagle in the sky cried out. Bolts of lightning struck down from the sky towards those cultivators. At the same time, Ling Shuang's black figure rushed out like a ghost. The long sword in her hand slashed down with a murderous aura. Luo Yu, I'm coming to help you. As soon as Ling Shuang's voice came out, she rushed towards Luo Yu, who was surrounded by 3 monarchs. 3 monarchs surrounded Luo Yu. Even though his combat strength was extraordinary, his body was now covered in wounds and fresh blood. When Luo Yu heard Ling Shuang's voice, he calmed down a little. Without turning his head, he shouted to her, I can hold on. Go to the sea and help Ling Hua. A large group of cultivators are besieging him at the bottom of the sea. Try your best to stop the whirlpool from drilling down. Don't disturb the Yama Lord. Hearing this, Ling Shuang looked at the surface of the sea and saw the whirlpool in the sea. The figures of cultivators were diving at the bottom of the sea. Blade and sword qi overflowed in all directions, slashing the sea and causing waves to churn. Okay. You hold on. Ling Shuang immediately jumped into the sea. This was because she knew that compared to Luo Yu and the others, her brother Ling Hua's fighting strength was slightly lacking. Moreover, they were fighting in the water, and under a group attack. There was also that whirlpool. If he went any deeper, he would definitely disturb the Yama Lord. All these years, they had obeyed the orders of their master to guard this place. Now that their master was not here, how could they allow the Yama Lord, who was resting in the sea, to be disturbed? The severity of the situation made her not hesitate at all. She just let Luo Yu hold on. That was because their people were almost here. Hit there. Sitting on the back of the lightning eagle, Yi Feifei grabbed the lightning eagle's feathers with one hand and wielded a sword with the other to attack the approaching cultivators. At the same time, the lightning eagle attacked the several sovereigns who were attacking Luo Yu. As a divine beast, the lightning condor was a combat-type bird. At this moment, it used its claws to tear apart the cultivators. At the same time, it also attacked the sovereigns who were surrounding Luo Yu. Crack! With a hiss, the lightning eagle struck one of the sovereigns. The sovereign was hit by the electric current and screamed. His body froze for a moment. In that moment, Luo Yu's sword was at his throat. Get out of the way! Another sovereign stretched out his hand and pulled him back. He shouted, Go and get rid of that lightning eagle. Chapter 5078. Clang! The sharp sound of the guqin attacked the monarch. Every note was like a sharp blade, not attacking the monarch's body, but the monarch's spirit. Hiss! The sovereign's divine soul was unexpectedly attacked by the sound of the guqin. He sucked in a breath of cold air and felt his divine soul being hit hard. After he stabilized his body, he looked around and saw a woman sitting cross-legged on the roof of the spaceship. She was playing the guqin rapidly. Her fingers plucked the strings of the guqin, and the notes shot directly to his divine soul. "It's you." The sovereign's voice was gloomy, and his eyes were filled with killing intent as he stared at the woman playing the guqin. The next moment, he waved his hand, and a stream of air flew out and attacked the roof of the spaceship. Whoosh! The sharp killing intent attacked. Enchanting flew up with the guqin in her arms. She was originally playing the guqin with both hands, but now she was playing it with one hand and the other hand. She played the guqin faster and faster, so fast that one could only see the shadows of her fingers plucking the strings of the guqin. One after another, attacks flew out of the guqin and attacked the surroundings. Hiss! Some cultivators were hit in the divine soul. They screamed and fell into the sea with their hands covering their heads. Water can conduct electricity. Electrocute them to death. Yi Fei shouted. After blocking the sharp sword of a cultivator who was attacking her, she flew up and kicked him. As soon as she shouted, the lightning eagle took the opportunity to attack the cultivators who fell into the sea. In an instant, screams could be heard from below. Okay, be careful. Ling Shuang and the others are in the water. Don't hurt them. Yi Fei shouted hurriedly. You're courting death. Be careful, Fei. Suddenly, a voice filled with killing intent came from behind Yi Fei. At the same time, it was accompanied by Qinshin's exclamation. Yi Fei only felt the hair on her back stand on end. An extremely powerful momentum and terrifying killing intent froze her whole body, and she couldn't even turn around. Bang! A palm landed heavily on Yi Fei's body, sending her flying. Her body flew off the back of the flash eagle and fell into the sea. Pooh! Blood spurted out from Yi Fei's mouth. She couldn't even stabilize her body. She only felt as if that palm had shattered all her internal organs. That kind of intense pain from the inside out caused her face to turn pale and her eyes to darken. It was as if she couldn't even hear anything. She only knew that she was falling. When the lightning vulture saw that she was falling, it no longer cared about attacking others. It quickly retracted its wings and dived down to catch her. Master! Yi Fei, who had fallen onto the lightning condor's back, had blood flowing out of her mouth. She opened her eyes and tried to stand up with her sword in her hand, but her body did not have the slightest bit of strength. In the end, darkness swallowed her up. Fei. Qinshin exclaimed. She was anxious and wanted to rush over to her. However, the Sovereign Realm cultivator stopped her and attacked her, blocking her way. In the depths of the sea, there was also a sea of blood. Blood dyed the sea red, and a murderous intent was lurking in the sea. Lang Hua held the handle of the immemorial umbrella. He injected spiritual power into his hand and tried to pull it up. His sister, Ling Shuang, protected him by his side and killed the cultivators who surrounded them. Chapter 5079. What they did not expect was that not only were they besieged, but even the heavenly pill building where Du Fan and the others were was also being attacked. The pill building was almost completely destroyed. Qi Kong and Wei Feng, who were guarding it, were fighting fiercely with the Phoenix Guard and the others. However, not long ago, they received news from Lang Hua and Lang Shuang that they were also being attacked in the Eastern Sea Spirit region. Therefore, some of them stayed here while others rushed to the Eastern Sea Spirit region. Compared to the pill building, the Eastern Sea was more important because the Yama Lord was there. Before Fingzhou ascended, he had left them many things, and the teleportation scroll was one of them. However, when Du Fan, Fan Lin, and the others appeared with a flash of light from the teleportation scroll, they saw the scene of Qin Xian being shot down into the sea. Qin Xian. Fan Lin's heart skipped a beat as he cried out in surprise. His figure quickly rushed out. However, they had come from the teleportation scroll and landed on the shore. No matter how fast they were, it would take them some time to reach the place where the spaceship was. Therefore, no matter how fast they were, they would not be able to catch Enchanting before she fell into the sea. Fortunately, when the lightning eagle was dodging with the unconscious Yi Feifei, it saw that Enchanting was injured and hurriedly flew down to catch her. When it saw Du Fan and the others coming, it immediately flapped its wings and flew towards them. Damn it! Seeing the situation here, Gumo's expression was extremely ugly as he cursed in a low voice. He quickly joined the battle and went forward to help Luo Yu, who was covered in injuries. Whoosh! Bang, bang, bang! Cold sword chi slashed out, heading straight for the sovereigns. As the powerful sword chi slashed down from the sky, it cut across the surface of the sea, splashing water and air currents. Can you still hold on? Gumo came to his side and asked while supporting him with one hand. Phew! You're finally here. If you came any later, I really wouldn't have been able to hold on. Luo Yu heaved a sigh of relief. His body was covered in blood, but he smiled evilly. He stared coldly at the sovereigns like a bloodthirsty Azura. There was no fear in his eyes. Instead, he was filled with murderous intent. Gumo came to Luo Yu's side to help, while Lu Yun came to Guan Xilin's side. Fan Lin quickly took out medicinal pills and fed them to Enchanting and Yi Feifei to protect their heart veins. Fong Cheng helped the Phoenix Guards fight against the other cultivators, while Du Fan went into the sea to help Ling Shuang and Lang Hua. With their help, the situation was quickly reversed. However, at this moment, a voice came from the clouds. It seems that the people left behind by Fengzhou are almost all here, right? That voice seemed to be talking to himself, but also seemed to be asking someone. Gumo and the others frowned when they heard it. They raised their heads to look, but they could not see the person who had spoken. They could only feel that there seemed to be a powerful pressure in the air. Come out! Kill them all! The countless small worlds in this world will be our world. As soon as the voice came out, another 8 sovereigns appeared in the clouds with many powerful cultivators and came down. The sound of war drums reverberated, each sound louder than the last. The smell of blood filled the sea. The deafening sound of war drums was accompanied by screams of killing. Luo Yu and the others, who had just gained the upper hand, fell into a bitter battle at this moment. Chapter 50-80. Fengzhou, who was dressed in dazzling red, came to the shore. When she saw the chaotic battle on the surface of the sea, her eyes turned cold. A powerful aura exuded from her body. The powerful aura surged and quickly spread to the horizon, almost enveloping the entire area. Her gentle voice, which carried a hint of coldness and bloodlust, spread out at this moment. How lively! That voice was neither fast nor slow, but it contained a frightening aura and coldness. It was only a gentle sentence, but in everyone's ears, it was like a sudden clap of thunder. Shock and disbelief appeared on the faces of all the sovereigns at this moment. The moment they heard that voice, the sovereigns and even the cultivators all felt a bone-chilling coldness shoot up from the soles of their feet to their hearts. It was unknown whether it was because they were too shocked, too frightened, or because they were shocked by the powerful pressure that permeated the air, but at this moment, everyone who was originally fighting in a chaotic and fierce manner was completely frozen. One by one, they stopped. The sea surface, which had been filled with screams, clanging sounds of weapons clashing, and the intense beating of war drums, was now so quiet that only the sound of waves crashing against the water could be heard. Everyone maintained their original fighting posture and did not move. They only turned their heads stiffly to look in the direction of the voice. With one look, their pupils suddenly shrank. On the shore, a dazzling red figure slowly walked towards the surface of the sea. As she moved forward, her figure flew into the air. Her dazzling red robes fluttered in the sea breeze, and her black hair fluttered. Her peerlessly beautiful face became clearer and clearer in everyone's eyes. Fengzhou. How is this possible? The sovereign's hearts shook violently. At this moment, the peerless beauty in red was like the king of hell and Rakshasa who came to take their lives. They were so shocked that their faces turned pale. They did not even have the courage to escape. Seems like I've come at the right time. Fengzhou, who was walking on the surface of the sea, said coldly at this moment. Compared to the shock and fear of the sovereigns and the cultivators, Luo Yu and the rest were only surprised and excited when they saw her. Looking at the familiar dazzling red robes, looking at the familiar beautiful face, and the familiar expression and voice on her face, the excitement in their hearts was indescribable. Master! 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 Their voices were filled with unconcealable excitement and surprise. Almost at the same time, they quickly rushed towards the red figure. Although they were in mid-air on the surface of the sea, at this moment, all of them stepped forward and bowed respectfully and excitedly. Your subordinate welcomes Master's return. Their voices were sonorous and powerful, filled with excitement and joy as they came from Luo Yu's and the others' mouths, echoing in the air above the sea. Fengzhou, who was standing on the breeze, placed one hand on her abdomen and the other behind her back. She stood quietly in the void, but the powerful pressure and intimidating aura she exuded were so strong that it made people want to submit to her and not dare to look directly at her. Chapter 5081. Xiao Zhou. You're finally back. These people thought they were all monarchs and said that you wouldn't be coming back. They actually wanted to attack Mose, who was resting in the deep sea. Guan Shilin said angrily as he strode to her side. Hearing this, Fengzhou's gaze fell on the surface of the sea 10 meters in front of her. There, the whirlpool was spinning and the air was surging. She stretched out her hand, and a wave of spiritual energy rushed out, instantly sucking up the thing below. Whoosh! Splash! That thing flew out with a whoosh, causing countless splashes as it flew out of the water. Following that thing was Leng Hua, who was tightly holding onto the handle of the umbrella. Master! Master! Du Fan and Leng Hua flew out of the sea. When they saw Fengzhou appear in front of them, they were overjoyed and their eyes were filled with excitement. Fengzhou looked at them. They were all covered in cuts and bruises. Even her brother was soaked in blood. More importantly, these people dared to attack Mose in the Spirit East Sea when she wasn't around. This was unforgivable. I remember that when I ascended, I gave an order that the Spirit Sea of the East Sea was nourishing Xianyuan Moses' soul, and no one was allowed to disturb his peace. It's only been a few years, and you've already forgotten my words. Her footsteps were light and slow as she walked forward on the breeze. With every step she took, the pressure that enveloped this area became a little heavier. Every sound and every word she spoke was like a clap of thunder that heavily smashed into their ears and hearts. It shook their blood and qi to the point that they were in great pain. Behind her, Luo Yu and the others couldn't feel the aura at all. It was as if the powerful aura was consciously targeted only at the monarchs and cultivators. That the cultivators were not as strong as the monarchs. They all screamed as blood flowed out of their 7 orifices. One by one, they fell into the sea and died. Pooh! 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 Even the sovereigns could not stop the blood from gushing out of their throats. They opened their mouths and spat out a mouthful of blood. Their bodies shook violently and they almost lost their balance. Their faces were ashen as their bodies trembled in the wind. Since you have forgotten, I can remind you again. Fengjiu was still walking forward at a leisurely pace, and the pressure in the air was gradually shrinking as she approached. Those who touch my reverse scale, I will make them live a life worse than death. Pooh! As she spoke, the sovereigns could only feel a powerful pressure pressing down on them. The powerful and terrifying airflow didn't even give them a chance to catch their breaths. They all spat out mouthfuls of blood. The sovereigns who could barely stand still felt as if they were being crushed by two huge mountains. Their bones were crushed and their bodies were compressed to the size of a child. However, it was not fatal. They still had a clear consciousness and endured the piercing pain from their spine. Ah! Chapter 5082. Fengjiu stopped in her tracks and looked at them coldly. However, she did not retract the power that was pressing down on them. Instead, she flipped her palm and a ball of heavenly life fire flew towards the feet of the sovereigns. I'll let you have a taste of dying by being roasted on fire. Perhaps you'll like it. Her voice was cold. She looked at them coldly without a trace of warmth in her eyes. However, among these sovereigns, she left the sovereign of the southern city alone. Even though Fengjiu did not touch him, he was so shocked that he did not even have the strength to speak when he saw the miserable state of the sovereigns. Who would have thought that Fengjiu would come back? Who would have thought that Fengjiu would come back? Clearly, for tens of millions of years, no one who had ascended had been able to come back. How did she do it? If he had known that Fengjiu would come back, he would not have dared to do what he did today. Now, regret and fear intertwined in his heart. His body trembled uncontrollably. However, he could only stare at the sovereigns around him in horror as they suffered excruciating pain. Ah! The sovereigns, powerful cultivators, could only scream in pain, regret, and fear at this moment. Some of them could not bear the excruciating pain and were ready to abandon their physical bodies to escape. However, their spiritual souls turned into a ball of light and flew out of their bodies. They were caught by Fengjiu. Did I allow you to escape? Do you think you can escape? Fengjiu's voice was indifferent. She didn't even move. She just stood there and grabbed at the air. The spiritual halo fell into her hand. If you fall into my hands, you won't even have the chance to be reincarnated. As she spoke, the flames in her hand surged and she crushed the ball of spiritual souls in her hand. Then, the ball of spiritual souls was blown away by the wind and fell into the sea. Looking at this scene, the sovereign of the southern city was so shocked that his body stiffened. He wanted to beg for mercy but he could not say a word due to his intense fear. He could only watch as Fengjiu tortured the sovereigns to death in front of him. Not even their spiritual souls were left behind. Do you know why I'm keeping you alive? Fengjiu looked at the sovereign of the southern city and asked indifferently. Phoenix Master, please spare my life. His entire body was weak and he could not even stand. He was being forcefully pulled by a force. Fengjiu looked at him and curled her lips, revealing an indifferent and merciless smile. You should know that those who touch my reverse scale have no chance of survival. I'm keeping you alive because I want to know what happened here in the years that I wasn't around. As she spoke, she walked forward step by step until she was in front of him. Under his terrified gaze, she placed her index finger between his eyebrows and started to search his spiritual soul. After a while, she retracted her hand. The sovereign of the southern city, who was initially terrified, was now in a daze. She waved her sleeve and a ball of flames burned him to ashes. She turned around and looked at the umbrella that Lang Hua was holding tightly. It was the Chaos Treasure umbrella. At this moment, it was sealed by her aura and was held in Lang Hua's hand. Chapter 5083. As she spoke, under Lang Hua's slightly stunned gaze, she raised her hand and waved it, erasing the soul contract on the Chaos Essence Treasure umbrella. Just as she erased the spiritual contract on the Chaos Essence Treasure umbrella, someone in the Heaven Realm suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes were fierce as he gritted his teeth and said, "Fengzhou." On the surface of the sea, Lang Hua looked at the Chaos Essence Treasure umbrella in his hand. It didn't seem like it wanted to fly away anymore. Instead, it calmed down and landed firmly in his hand. He couldn't help but be stunned. He quickly regained his senses and said, "Lang Hua, thanks master." Therefore, he quickly dripped his blood on the treasure to make it his master. After that, he felt that he had an additional level of affinity and familiarity with the Chaos Essence Treasure umbrella. Fengzhou then looked at everyone and said to them word by word, "Fengzhou, am back." Everyone looked at their master, who was as dazzling as the sun. They were overjoyed. Every one of them smiled from the bottom of their hearts. The alliance of the sovereigns was an intense and tragic battle for them. However, to their master, one person was enough. "Master, when we received news from Lang Hua and the others and rushed back, the Pill Pavilion was also under siege," Du Fan quickly said. Hearing this, Fengzhou nodded and said, "I understand." As soon as she finished speaking, her gaze fell on the surface of the sea. She released her divine sense and looked down. When she saw that the defensive boundary she set up at the bottom of the sea was still there, she knew that this fierce battle didn't disturb Mose's spiritual soul. Therefore, she said to everyone, "Treat your wounds first. I'll go to the Pill Pavilion to take a look." As soon as she finished speaking, she waved her sleeve and a void teleportation vortex appeared in front of her. At the same time, at the Pill Pavilion, Qi Kong and Hui Lang, who were guarding the Pill Pavilion, were fighting together. However, other than the sovereigns, there were also many cultivators. Almost no one dared to approach within 100 miles. Many people were shocked by the fierce battle between the Elixir Pavilion's members and the sovereigns. Even though Fengzhou had ascended for a few years, her prestige was still there. Her powerful subordinates were still there. Moreover, each of them was an expert capable of holding their own. If they didn't know, who would dare to make a move against them? Furthermore, it was such a large-scale attack that the entire Pill Pavilion was destroyed. The entire city was shrouded in the aura of the sovereigns, isolating the surroundings. The cultivators of the aristocratic families in the city could barely take care of themselves, so they were unable to help the Elixir Pavilion. Even though Qi Kong, Grey Wolf, and the others were fighting a bloody battle, they couldn't withstand the continuous rotation of the battle even if they could take on 100 experts by themselves. "If I don't die today, I'll kill them all," Hui Lang said bitterly. He blocked the attack with his sword. "Be careful." Not far away, Qi Kong, who was fighting with two sovereigns, shouted. However, he couldn't free himself to help Hui Lang. He could only watch as a sword pierced his abdomen from behind. Grey Wolf let out a muffled groan. He turned around and slashed at the cultivator. The swift and fierce sword slashed the cultivator into two halves. However, the sword still pierced his abdomen. Chapter 5084. Hui Lang covered the wound in his abdomen with one hand and retreated to Yin Yi's side. His forehead was covered in cold sweat and his face was pale. He asked, "What's that sound?" It sounds like the sound of a beast running. Yi said hesitantly. Then he came back to his senses and supported Hui Lang with one hand. Seeing that the sword was still in his abdomen and blood was seeping out, Yi asked, "How are you?" "TSK. I won't die." Grey Wolf snorted and took a deep breath. He reached his hand behind him and grabbed the sword. With a burst of spirit energy, he broke the sword that was piercing his waist. Clang! The sharp sword was snapped in half, making a clear clanging sound. He didn't pull out the broken sword because he knew that if he pulled it out, the blood wouldn't stop. The battle was not over yet. He could still fight. Bai Xiao is here. Qi Kong said with a glint in his eyes. He came at the right time. As long as we can hold those cultivators back, we will have a chance to win. Roar! Roar! Just as he finished speaking, he heard the roars of beasts in the midst of the rumbling. At the same time, the sovereigns' faces darkened. When they looked back, they noticed that a huge eagle was flying over. On the back of the eagle was a man in green who was playing a flute. No one heard the sound of the flute, but they could see that the flute was emitting circles of musical notes. Roar! About a few hundred powerful beasts flew over and pounced on those cultivators. Once they pounced on them, they tore at them. This caused the cultivators who came with the sovereigns to instantly fall into a chaotic battle between humans and beasts. "Are you all okay?" Bai Xiao turned the flute in his hand and asked Qi Kong and the others below. "If you had come a little later, we would have been in trouble." Hui Lang showed a pale smile. When Bai Xiao saw that they were all covered in wounds, she said, "My beasts can only deal with those cultivators, but they can't deal with those sovereigns. The monarch's strength and aura were too strong. These ferocious beasts were not ancient divine beasts. They could deal with the cultivators, but these ferocious beasts did not dare to get close to the monarchs. Let us deal with them." As Qi Kong spoke, he turned the sword in his hand and stared at the cultivators who were watching the chaotic battle between humans and beasts with gloomy expressions. As soon as he finished speaking, he lifted his sword and soared into the air, attacking one of the sovereigns. Seeing this, Bai Xiao jumped down from the eagle's back and stopped Hui Lang, who was about to step forward to fight with his sword. She said, "Do you want to die? There's still a broken sword in your abdomen that's bleeding." "I won't die. I'll go kill a few more," Hui Lang said as he pushed him aside and prepared to go forward. "Go to the back and stay there," Yi said with a frown. He asked Bai Xiao to keep an eye on him, then he took a deep breath and flew toward the sovereigns. "Leave the rest to us. We'll kill them all." Many of them swung their swords and killed a few cultivators, then went toward the sovereigns. In terms of combat strength, the 8 captains of the Phoenix Guards were all on par with each other. Moreover, they were all trained by their master. As long as they could hold back those troublesome cultivators, they were confident that they could deal with the sovereigns. Chapter 5085. Looking at the chaotic battle, Bai Xiao said, "Why is the elixir pavilion destroyed? Where are the others? Why are there only a few of you here?" Hui Lang took a deep breath, cold sweat dripping from his forehead. He said, "These people have been plotting this for a long time. They split into 2 groups and attacked. Besides the elixir pavilion, even the East Sea spiritual region was attacked. Therefore, other than the few of us guarding here, everyone else rushed over there." The East Sea spiritual region. Bai Xiao was shocked. Are they going to attack the Yama Lord? Where did they get the guts? Madam has been away for many years, and we are the only ones guarding here. They are naturally unwilling to stay like this. Moreover, there seems to be something else going on. There is a mastermind behind this. Be careful. As Hui Lang spoke, he let out a low cry and reached out to pull him away. At the same time, he held the sword in his hand and slashed forward. Ah! A cultivator who was about to launch a sneak attack screamed and fell down. Hui Lang also staggered a few steps back. Bai Xiao supported him and looked at the chaotic scene. He said, "Let me help you to a safe place first. You should apply some medicine to stop the bleeding." He supported him and was about to retreat when he saw Qi Kong fighting with a sovereign in the air. Not far away, another sovereign took the opportunity to attack him from behind. He was so shocked that he shouted, "Qi Kong, be careful behind you." However, even though he warned him, Qi Kong was caught in a golden net by the sovereign in front of him. As he struggled, the net became tighter and tighter. There was no way he could avoid the fatal sword behind him. "You stay here. I'll go help him." When Bai Xiao saw this, he ignored the fact that he wasn't a match for a monarch-rank powerhouse and rushed towards Qi Kong. "Old man, you have such a magic weapon." Hui Lang cursed. He held the sword in his hand and rushed forward. He did not care about the broken sword in his body. "Get out of the way." Bai Xiao, who couldn't block the sovereign's sword, saw that the sword was about to strike Qi Kong, so he pounced forward and knocked him away. Both of them fell from the sky and landed on the back of a ferocious beast. They were then blasted away and rolled down the ruined walls of the elixir pavilion. "You're courting death." The sovereign's face darkened as his sword missed its target. His eyes were filled with murderous intent. His gaze swept across the crowd and landed on Qi Kong and Bai Xiao. "Do you think you can still survive today? Let me tell you, this day next year will be the anniversary of your death." As he spoke, he condensed his spiritual power on the sword in his hand again, and a powerful sword aura burst out from the blade. As he raised his hand, the sword also rose, pointing directly at the two people in the corner of the ruins. "Really?" Suddenly, a cold voice was heard. It was extremely abrupt, especially for those who were familiar with the voice. They were even more shocked when they heard it. Even the few sovereigns were stunned when they heard the cold female voice, and a bad feeling rose in their hearts. They looked in the direction of the voice and saw a whirlpool appear in the sky not far away. A dazzling red figure was coming out of the whirlpool. As she came out, the whirlpool behind her disappeared. "Master! Madam!" Chapter 5086. Even though the sovereigns had never seen Fingzhou before, they had heard of her reputation. They also knew that she was beautiful and liked to wear red clothes. At this moment, they were stunned when they saw Fingzhou suddenly appear here. "Fingzhou! How is this possible? How many years has it been since Fingzhou ascended? How could she still be here? Could she be an imposter?" However, as soon as this thought appeared, their faces turned pale and ashen. This was because as she walked in the air, the aura and pressure in the air that were hundreds of times stronger than theirs approached. Even the sovereigns found it difficult to breathe in front of her. Perhaps you don't know that the sovereigns who besieged the East Sea spiritual region are already dead. Fingzhou's voice was neither fast nor slow, but they could hear the coldness and murderous intent in her voice. "This day next year will not only be the anniversary of their deaths, but also the anniversary of your deaths." As she said this, the sovereigns started bleeding from their 7 orifices. They could not even speak. Pfft. The powerful pressure caused the blood in their bodies to run amok. Their vision became blurry because of the blood that seeped out of their eyes. They also spat out a mouthful of blood from their hearts. They could not even stand in the air and fell. At this moment, countless ferocious beasts were still fighting with the sovereigns a moment ago. However, after Fingzhou's voice and her arrival, the ferocious beasts all lay on the ground obediently. They did not even dare to raise their heads. As for the sovereigns, they were all lying on the ground and did not dare to move. Their bodies were trembling, especially those who had seen Fingzhou before. They were so scared that they fainted. Qi Kong and the others saw their master raise her hand. A few rays of cold light instantly shot into the sovereigns' foreheads. At the same time, their souls were shattered and their lives were extinguished at that moment. You dare to destroy my alchemy pavilion. You have guts. The cultivators felt a chill in their hearts. They knew that today was not only the death anniversary of the monarchs, but also their own death anniversary. Sure enough, not long after that voice fell, one by one, they fell to the ground with a muffled groan. They did not see how Fingzhou killed them because Fingzhou did not make a move at all. Instead, he directly used his pressure to crush their souls. Little Bai, get these ferocious beasts to leave the city, Fingzhou said, looking at Bai Xiao in the corner. Yes. Bai Xiao immediately responded. She stood up and looked at the sky. With the deaths of the sovereigns, the barrier and pressure they had set up in the air dissipated. Immediately, he took out his flute and played it, driving the ferocious beasts out of the city and back into the forest. Your subordinates kowtow to you, master. Under the lead of Qi Kong and the others, along with the Phoenix guards who were guarding the alchemy pavilion, they all knelt on one knee and bowed respectfully. They looked at their master with excitement. They did not know why their master, who had already ascended, had returned. They only knew that it was great to see their master again. Rise, all of you. Fingzhou said and walked forward slowly. He could not help but sigh when he saw that they were covered in wounds and that the alchemy pavilion behind them had been reduced to ruins.
Chapter 5087. Fengjiu looked at them kneeling and said, "You've done your best. If it's destroyed, then so be it. It's fine as long as you're fine." As she spoke, she looked at Hui Lang. Seeing that there was still a broken sword in his abdomen and his face was abnormally pale, she said to them, "Find a place to heal first." The heavenly elixir building was destroyed, but they still had a courtyard here. Therefore, they went to another courtyard first, leaving some Phoenix guards to guard the ruins and tidy up the place. Seeing that Fengjiu and the others left for another courtyard to heal, the aristocratic families and various forces in the city were in an uproar. Fengjiu was back. The ghost Dr. Fengjiu, who had already ascended, was back. While everyone was shocked and in disbelief, the news spread quickly. Some people were happy, while others were uneasy. In another courtyard, Hui Lang was helped to a room to lie down on the bed. Fengjiu sat beside him, and Bai Xiao assisted from the side. The place where the sword was stabbed will definitely bleed profusely. But you don't have to worry. With me here, you won't die, Fengjiu said, looking at the grinning Hui Lang and shaking her head. "Madam, it's great that you're back." "Madam, why are you back? Have you been to the Eastern Sea Spirit region to see my master? Is my master going to wake up?" He, with Madam here, I know I won't die." Hui Lang's weak face had a big smile. Seeing her, he was excited and happy. Over at the Eastern Sea Spirit region, Luo Yu and the others are also injured. This time, many sovereigns came to besiege them. It's said that they have designs on Immerse. As she spoke, she took advantage of his distraction to pull out the broken sword that was stuck in his body. Hui Lang groaned, as if he couldn't catch his breath. When the broken sword was pulled out, a pillar of blood also splashed out. Then, fresh blood gushed out. Fengjiu quickly sealed his surrounding acupoints to stop the bleeding and clean his wounds. When she was done, she didn't hear him make another sound. She couldn't help but look up, only to see that he had already fainted. Seeing this, she could not help but shake her head and smile. Looking at the wound, she extended her hand and condensed green lotus qi to heal him. Bai Xiao supported Hui Lang and watched as the wound on Hui Lang's abdomen healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the end, not even a scar could be seen. Hui Lang snorted softly, as if someone had woken him up from a deep sleep. He moved slightly and suddenly opened his eyes. He saw his wife washing her hands and Bai Xiao staring at his abdomen. "What are you doing?" Hui Lang glared at him and instinctively covered his naked abdomen with one hand. However, when her hand touched her abdomen, she was stunned. She looked down and saw that there was not even a wound. She could not help but be surprised.
Chapter 5088. She looked at Hui Lang and said, "You can leave now that you've recovered. It's still a mess outside, and I don't have time to waste here. As for your questions, I'll answer them when I'm done." As she spoke, she had already walked out. When the door opened, Chi Kong and many others were helping some Phoenix guards bandage their wounds. When they saw her coming out, they walked forward and greeted, "Master. How are your injuries?" She asked as her gaze swept past the Phoenix guards. "Their injuries are not fatal, but they are not light either. Other than those who are injured, 17 of our brothers have died," Chi Kong said with a heavy expression. Those Phoenix guards were all trained by them, and this time, 17 of them had died. Hearing this, Feng Jiu was silent for a moment and said, "Give them a proper burial." Most of the Phoenix guards were raised by orphans. They did not even have a relative, and the Feng family was their home. She was their master and their relative. "Yes, I understand," Chi Kong said and asked, "Master, how are things in the East Sea spiritual region? Do we still need to send people over? Now that so many sovereigns have died, the various regions and heaven realms are bound to be in chaos. There's also the person behind the scenes. He was the one who started this. Before I came, I searched the soul of the South Qing sovereign and roughly knew what happened." As Feng Jiu spoke, she looked at the sky in the distance and said, "The monarch behind this is known as the Clear Sky Monarch. A few years ago, for some reason, he obtained the Black Lotus that was lost somewhere. The Clear Sky Monarch is the descendant of a great emperor from the celestial world." Speaking of this, she paused for a moment and said, "This time, other than dealing with all of you, they mainly wanted to use Immerse to deal with me. However, they did not expect me to return at this time." Hearing this, the few of them felt a lingering fear. If their master had not returned, they would not have been able to protect the Yama Lord in the East Sea spiritual region. The heavenly pill dispensary has been destroyed, and there's no need to rebuild it. Right now, there are other things for you to do. Feng Jiu looked at them and said, "Master, please instruct us." "Madam, please give me your orders." The few of them spoke in unison as their gazes fell on her. Now that she was here, no matter what she asked them to do, they would be at ease. "Guard the heaven realm well. Now that so many sovereigns have died in my hands, there will definitely be chaos. You all." As she spoke, suddenly, as if she had sensed something, her expression changed abruptly. "Not good." With a flick of her sleeve, a teleportation vortex appeared in front of her, and the red figure quickly rushed into it. Chi Kong and the others were stunned. By the time they reacted, the teleportation whirlpool was about to close. Chi Kong immediately shouted, "Hui Lang, follow them." Almost as soon as he finished speaking, Hui Lang's figure quickly swept past and jumped into the vortex. At the same time, the vortex disappeared. Did something happen in the Eastern Sea Spirit region? Master's expression is so panicked. I'm afraid this matter has something to do with the Yama Lord. Many people at the side said with a solemn and worried expression. Ingi pursed his lips and didn't speak. This was because he knew that many people's guesses were probably not far from the truth. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.